T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Kush's Corner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Before we get started, as always, USARC. They are the organization that fights for our rights to keep reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, to live this lifestyle. Without them, we would be in rough shape. So if you are a member of USARC already, thank you for being a part of it. And if you're not already a member of USARC, please become one. Check out what they're all about. We have strength in numbers here as the reptile industry. So the more people that we can have behind the cause of preserving our industry, the better. And tonight's episode is brought to you by Texas Chondros. Mark Hager, he is one of my favorite people in the industry. I know that is a sentiment shared by our guest tonight. If you like designer green tree pythons, check out Texas Chondros. He's got a great Instagram page where he not only posts his own animals, but he also curates an array of different green tree pythons, primarily from keepers here in the great state of Texas. Mark Hager, Texas Chondros, check him out. We're also brought to you by SUNDOWN Reptiles, Brian Susan. Brian and I go way back. We both have roots back in Chicago, and he's someone who I really look up to in this industry. I really admire. If you are interested in tree monitors, rare geckos, abronia, and all the other things that Brian works with, check out SUNDOWN Reptiles. Check out his website. Check out the social media. He's someone who I really think shows a great example these days of what it means to be a professional breeder in this day and age. Also, for anybody who's going to be at the Tinley Park NARBC show this coming weekend, SUNDOWN Reptiles will be there, so check out the booth. We're also brought to you by Blake's Exotic Feeders. If you are in the market for feeder quail, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. Everything is hand-raised right here in the United States, and you can ship right to you. So Blake's Exotic Feeders. All right, guys. Well, we're here for an episode that I'm very excited about. It's interesting because we kind of had a booking mix-up, or I guess lack of communication, where I was unaware he was going to be on the All in the Tree Tuesday segment last week. And I listened to that show and I loved it. And afterwards, I was thinking we could do 3 hours right now about completely different topics. And I think that speaks to kind of the variety that Patrick works with, where, we can, he could probably be a guest on this channel every week and have a different topic to talk about. But we have a lot of similarities in our interests. Patrick and I go way back. So I'm excited to have him here. But before, I'd just like to shout out people who are already here. 1776 Exotics, what's up? Joe Meteoric Serpents. If anyone is interested in colubrids, the Colubrid Corruption podcast, you should check it out. I did an episode there a few weeks ago. He always has awesome guests. Brooke, how's it going? Thank you for being here. Brandon Wheeler, what's going on? Jason, thank you for being here. I wonder why this guy's in the chat. That's a little strange, but without further ado, let's get him. Let's get to this. What's going on, Patrick?
What's up, man? I can't imagine why Brandon Wheeler would be here. Surely not for the scrubs.
Not for just about everything that we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
man.
what's happening, dude?
Dude, just fucking living the life over here. Scrubs and venomous snakes and colubrids, and I think you know how it goes if anybody does.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing those cages behind you like that, because if I was in the next room over in the adult room on this side, it would look like, well, there's a wall of black PVC cages just like that, but they would all be actively hunting me from their perches right now.
Yeah, we just have the Mr. Key Island scrub up there, just being nice and well behaved, basking.
He's creeping.
Yeah. Before we get into anything, I forgot to mention, but for anyone who's listening right now, any super chats that are made tonight will be donated directly to USARC. So if anyone has questions for me, for Patrick, discussion topics that they want to have heard, if you want to ensure that we're going to get to them, drop a super chat, and it goes to a good cause. So, I mean, let's get right to it. We have a lot of similar interests in terms of reptiles. One thing that we share that is kind of gaining steam these days are the scrub pythons. So talk to me about your collection of scrub pythons and kind of your history with them.
Sure. So everybody knows that the arboreal snakes are my thing. It's not just snakes. That's just all I really have time to keep. I'm actually into chameleons and geckos and like basically anything arboreal is cool to me. It's just that lizards are and tree frogs. I used to keep all that stuff, but they're just very time consuming, and I just don't. I can't afford the time to give them what they need. I do have, we have Parsons at Ambers and got some tree frogs and stuff over there too. But obviously, if you're into arboreal snakes, a lot of the things that are attractive about arboreal snakes, not just in color, but in the physicality and their physiology. Scrub pythons are kind of the peak of that, right? Like they're the head shape, the head scalation, the musculature, their physical capabilities. There's not really other animals. There's a few that move like that, but there's no other snakes that are that big that move like a scrub does. It's unbelievable. Am I still okay? I thought I lost your sound there for a second. I got you back. I actually started getting into scrubs and kind of all, back then they were still Morelia. So kind of all Morelia real seriously about the same time. So like 06, 07, I got my first chondros in 98. I got my first carpet python in 2004, and 2006, I started keeping chondros again. And I have since then. I've had chondros nonstop since 2006. But 2006, 2007, I really started looking at more carpet pythons. And there was a couple people that I was talking to about carpets, and scrubs kind of came into the conversation. And I also just kind of lucked into an animal. Somebody brought a massive barneck male into a pet store that I used to work at. This thing was, 12, 13 feet long. It was a huge barneck male, and brought in as a female actually, but it turned out to be male. And it was huge and old and beat up. It had a huge, massive scar down its ventral scales. And I have no idea what that was from, old predator scar or something. It had literally, this snake had been gutted at some point. Like it had like this massive scar.
Jeez.
And he was sweet as can be. Never, ever, ever one time defensive to me. Obviously wild caught. And,
right.
And I wanted him. This girl that I knew that worked at the shop, she bought him, but hadn't figured out where to put him yet. So she still had him living at the shop. And she was trying to get that figured out, trying to get something built at home to be able to handle him. And then I think she was having second thoughts about it. I think she kind of impulse bought him. And I had told her that I wanted the snake, and they had a nice yellow Amazon tree boa come into the shop. And she said, "Buy me that yellow Amazon and I'll give you the scrub." And that sounds a little crazy right now, but dude, back then, and a wild caught scrub and a colored Amazon were about the same price.
Yeah.
So you're not going to find, there wasn't a lot of 13 footers floating around. But you could get import barnecks for under $100 pretty regularly back then. I actually remember in the 90s seeing just yellow scrub. Who the fuck knows what that is? Could have been a Moluccan, could have been a Southern, could have been a Barneck for $25 on import lists. So nobody wanted them. They were considered trash snakes because they're mean and they get too big and they're ugly and all these things that people said about scrubs who clearly had never worked with scrub pythons.
Right.
So, but yeah, so I got that guy, fell in love immediately. They're just one of the most impressive animals on the planet. Scrubs are an apex predator. And it's like having a tiger or a fucking great white shark in your house or something. You know, they're literally top of the food chain animals. And it's kind of a crazy way to dive into it, but I'd never kept a snake that just seems so aware. And, you know, I don't always like using the word intelligent, but if we're using it relatively speaking, extremely intelligent, compared to a fucking California king snake or something. And, man, I just fell in love with that snake. And so my next one was a baby, Morocco that I picked up at NARBC, maybe the first NARBC, one of the first ones in Arlington. Buddy of mine had a deli cup, a giant deli cup full of sibling red neonate Southerns. And I opened up the deli cup, and the first one that nailed me, I pulled it out and I was like, this one will do. And it's not the only time I've picked a snake that way. First one to bite me. Sign of vigor, right? Baby snakes are supposed to be defensive.
That is true.
Right? And so this animal stood up, did the full stand up defensive and like lunged out and tagged me on the finger. And I was like, yep, you're the one. So got another Morocco shortly after that. And then within a couple of years, you know, I started collecting a lot more chondros, a lot more carpets. I was keeping, got into Brettles pythons, and I had jungles and coastals and some of the first high percentage jungle jags and diamond jungles, all that stuff. But Moluccans and Halmaheras were readily available and inexpensive back then. The most I had ever paid for a Moluccan back then was $150. And I got multiples for 100, 100 and a quarter. Same with the Holmes. They were 100, 150 bucks. I think I got the first Halmaheras that I ever actually had at home in the collection. I think came from Nick Bottini. He's what is it, Cold Blooded Earth. He does all the blood pythons now. I missed probably the best looking Azanthic Clasto that I've ever seen. He had for sale for a sub-adult female for $500. She was solid silver, basically almost patternless. And I missed her by hours. He was like, yeah, I just sold her. And I was like, call that guy. He sold her for $500. I said, call him, tell him I'll give him $1,000 for her right now. And the guy, he wasn't trying to hear it, but yeah, I think I paid $175 for established, like, you know, several month captive juvenile Halmaheras from Nick. And yeah, so that was kind of my intro to scrubs. The thing that probably even more so than the bar neck, the thing that just really, really solidified my love for those animals is the one that I got from Crutchfield that ended up with David, that sired the animals that we got.
Yep.
Tom posted this animal on kingsnake.com back when that was still a thing. And the animal in the picture looked fully patternless, and he was advertising it as a patternless female. And if I remember correctly, I think I paid about $400 shipped for this animal, and maybe $450 shipped. And he was asking three something for it. It was $450 with shipping. And when I got it, and he said it had been raised from a baby by the person that he bought it from, and he was just brought it in and was just flipping it, and which I know I've said this on probably every podcast that I've ever been on, but I got my first arboreal snakes from Tom Crutchfield in '95. My first Amazons came from Tom in '95. I got this animal in, and it actually wasn't patternless. It just had a super faded pattern that would kind of come in and out. They fluctuate drastically day to night and with their mood or sheds or whatever, and the animal had a faint pattern. It turned out to be male. I didn't care. It was about 9 feet long and just the sweetest snake, man. The sweetest snake. Same thing, just like that big barneck, at this point, that barneck had passed away. I think I had him for about 3 years or something, and he stopped wanting to eat. He was really old. Made me wonder if he had complications related to whatever caused that massive scar on him. And no telling. I mean, a snake like that, no telling how old that thing really was. I had zero history on him. So anyways, I was bummed out about that, and all my others were juvenile. So when I got this one, having another adult scrub that also was just the sweetest snake, just that animal is still to this day one of the coolest snakes I've ever kept. I sent him to David Means in trade. I traded him for 3 green tree pythons, Ed Bradley, Highland outcrosses that were all older siblings to Kronos. Garrick's Kronos. Garrick was on the show last night. Everybody knows his blue male Kronos. These 3 animals were older siblings. No, that may not be accurate. I can't remember if Kronos was the 2010 or 2012. Ed did that pairing 4 or 5 times. They may have been clutch mates, either clutch mates or the pairing before Kronos. Anyways, traded that snake to David for all 3 of those. And I was bummed to see him go, but he wasn't doing anything at my house. I wanted him to go somewhere where David was going to use him, breed him.
Yeah.
And so I see Aiden said on there, and sorry, I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to the comments. I've seen Aiden saying that he was from the first clutch. I think that's accurate because I believe the first one was 2010. The second one was 2012. Okay. To give you guys an idea about how chondro pricing has changed since then, most people on here know what happened to me in 2012, but right before all that happened, Ed was going to give me first pick, not first pick after his holdbacks, first pick of the clutch from the 2012 repeat for $450. And that was cool, but it wasn't like unbelievable or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so that snake, David was never really able to get anything done with him for years. And then he had him cohabbed with a classic Southern female. They were kind of his ambassador animals. He would take them to Carpet Fest. They were both just such laid back, super chill animals. Yeah. He said that my male was the only scrub he ever fully trusted. That animal also put him in the ER. He escaped one night, and David came in and went to flip the light on to go into the room, and he was posted up on top of a cage in ambush right there at the door. And so when David reached up for the light switch, he nailed him, and the teeth got under his skin in the back of his hand and created a massive hematoma. So his hand blew up like a balloon instantly. It looked like a rattlesnake bite. And all the blood like settled down into the palm of his hand over the next couple of days. So his entire palm was black. And it literally looked like a rattlesnake bite. He was fine. It really wasn't that big of a deal. Just a lot of blood under the skin, but it looked horrific. A feeding response bite from a scrub is no joke.
For sure.
It's no, this is something to be avoided. So, anyways, David finally got one clutch unexpected out of that male, and he actually died. I think before they hatched. I think he died while the eggs were incubating, or while the female was gravid.
Okay.
So it was pretty important and pretty crazy that he finally got him, like, with a female he'd been cohabbed with for a long time.
Yeah.
And he finally got her knocked up. And you and I both have animals from that pairing.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely outrageous. They're just perfect Southerns.
Yeah.
So, which I guess brings me to current collection. Currently I have 1.1, almost all my scrubs are captive bred, which I think is probably uncommon for most scrub collections other than yours. Yours doesn't count. There's like,
I'm probably up 50 now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like your scrub collection and everybody else's. You know? So it's the same thing with my green trees over here, though. So I have similar numbers over here, but so I've got 1.1 Barn X that you produced, the younger male and the older female. Actually, I don't have the lights off in here, so might be able to get away with messing with the little guy while we're talking. I don't reach into anything around here when the lights are off. All my animals are programmed monsters.
Yeah.
I want my snakes to be ready to rock and roll after lights out, because I'm not dicking around after lights out. I'm feeding, and I want them to be. All my snakes are conditioned to be that way. Yeah, this is the little male reduced pattern, which is my jam with Barn X.
Yeah,
I love that. The kind of Sauron Maniquari pheno, the Vogelkop phenotype, or the one we associate with it.
Yeah.
This guy's a sweetie, really good aggressive feeding response, but he's a really sweet snake.
That's how you want him.
And then my female, she's from your first clutch.
Yeah. First clutch.
Yeah. So, which is awesome. Most people who know about my chondro stuff know that I'm kind of like a sucker for the sentimental attachments to the lineage and history and all that stuff. I'm a hardcore lineage and history geek, and there's just not much cooler of a face than the scrub python, man. I'm just sitting here admiring this guy because I don't have time to do it a whole lot. But so then I've got a pair of captive bred Southerns. One of them is from your clutch, and the other one from James's clutch. And I guess I know Ryan is calling them like Tanamara, whatever he's associating with. But I believe the ones he produced last year also, the adults were Highland phenotype.
The only picture that I saw was of the female on eggs, and she kind of looked like kind of more brown Highland Southern.
Okay.
Looked not quite.
Yeah.
I don't know what the sire looked like. The babies all looked really cool that I've seen so far.
Yeah, and we can maybe we can touch a little bit more. I don't know if this is the show for it or not. I don't know anywhere near as much. Sorry, I got a probe cord under me. I don't know anywhere near as much about scrub localities as I do chondro localities, but I know enough, and I know for an absolute fact that the Orange Highland phenotype is, first of all, widespread across all of southern Papua. It's not a specific area. I know for an absolute fact that it is variable within given populations, and I know for an absolute fact that phenotype exists in low elevation areas. 100%. I've seen pictures of Orange Highland scrubs crossing roads far from the mountains. They don't have to, like, I think there's a lot we don't understand about about their variability and what these. But it's just like the chondro stuff, you know. People, the sellers know what sells, and things get certain labels, right?
Yeah, I mean that's why I try to, you know, my philosophy, and you know, you can tell me what yours is, but I really try to use locality type labels as minimally as possible, just because I don't feel confident with that labeling.
Yeah,
As a
yeah,
hobby, we have our names that we associate with a phenotype, like the Wamina phenotype.
hmm,
That's
yeah,
by a per animal. You know, Ari has told me about an animal he saw in Wamina that was kind of Barnack-ish. You know,
yeah,
what do we know? And you know, like the oxabil thing, from what I've heard, that's a complete myth that there aren't even scrubs in oxabil. But oxabil is what we associate with that orange highland.
yeah,
But if you see the picture that you saw, that I think you showed me, of that snake down at like 1,400 feet, okay, that's clearly not a highland anything. Um,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I'm at 3,500 feet of elevation, and I'm in the flats. I'm not even close to the mountains. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so you know, I think, and I think with Barnex, you get into a whole other, you know, you get even deeper into the weeds, because we're not even sure where the variability comes from within those.
yeah,
Is it pattern? Is it
yeah,
base color? What, like, is there locality variation? And is the
yeah.
locality variation maybe something like body structure and not even color? Because I feel like we
Hmm.
associate locality type differences with color and pattern differences. But why does
I
that necessarily
no,
have
go ahead.
no, I just don't think
Yeah,
that necessarily has to be the case.
I agree. I'm supposed to get on the phone with Daniel Natusch this month, and I've talked to him about this in the past, but you know, mostly I'm going to be on the phone with him geeking out on chondro locality stuff. But I want to talk scrubs with him too. Daniel told me that he has seen. This is loosely speaking, and we're not talking about super subtle stuff and whatnot. But he told me that he has seen most of the range of phenotypes that we see in any given scrub population. And he's seen hundreds and hundreds of wild scrub pythons. I'm not talking, you know, sample size is a big problem when people get on talking about shit. You got a lot of people, they're talking about their breeding experience when they've, you know, been breeding a species for 4 years and had 6 clutches or whatever. That's cool. Share your experience, but what people speak about their experiences matter of factly as if there's a pattern there. And it's like, dude, that hasn't happened to you enough to call it a pattern.
Yep.
Daniel Natusch is not that guy. He documented 1,700 wild chondros for his study. And, you know, he's seen lots and lots and lots of scrubs. And he told me, again, kind of loosely, that you will see a huge range of variability with scrub python phenotypes in any given population. So take that however you will. I'm going to slide over and grab another animal. I don't know. These guys will probably try to kill me. Oh, actually, no, this is great. Um, this little female, I was going to pull out my little Highland female, but um, she's nasty. So I have a pair of captive bred Highlands, one from you, one from James Oakdale.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was cool that you and James and Ryan all produced this type of Southern scrub for the first time in the United States, all in the same year. I don't know, the female that I got from James, he's like, oh yeah, she's really calm. She's not. She's a nasty bitch. She's one of the most defensive scrubs that I have.
That's
But
funny.
this is the little male from you, and he just shed. Like literally, his shed's wet in there, and he just finished.
Damn.
Yeah, dude. The striping and aberrant pattern of this thing is utterly ridiculous. That's crazy, right? He's finally coming out of it. Look at that shit. He's finally coming out of his red. I was actually hoping for a little more reduced in the pattern, but also looking at the adults, at his sire, I'm kind of thinking that as his ground color lightens, that maybe I don't know that this black is going to darken. I feel like he'll lighten overall. If he ends up kind of going like his dad does, but
the first darker brown to black kind of on the dorsal in his pattern.
Yeah,
as minimal as the pattern is.
Yes. Now this animal, the first third of it is fully striped and reduced. It's like dots and dashes stripes. I've seen plenty where they have a striped neck, especially dorsally.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing about this clutch, yes, is the lateral, like double lateral stripes. That's just
that is crazy right there. If you're only listening to the audio version of this show, go to the video because this is insane.
Yeah. So I really, really dig this animal. I'm super excited to have him, and the little female that I got from James. She looks like she's going more traditional. I chose one that you could start to see the kind of dashes of light markings down the spine because the female had that same pattern. James's female is gorgeous.
Yeah, she's super nice.
Yeah, super nice. Fun fact, I almost bought the sire of this snake and right when he came in and passed on it. Yeah, and I passed on it. I had a different deal going with Blake, and he was like, well, what about this? And I was like, oh my God, I need that. But, I got a slight sign of maturity that I'm like, okay, but what am I going to do with that? I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't have anything ready for him. And I'm really, really glad that you got him.
Me too.
Because he'd probably still be sitting over here doing nothing. Or I would have already sold him to you.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I mean that male to me is probably one of like the 5 most unique scrub pythons that I've seen, as far as like what that phenotype typically looks like compared to that animal looks like. I'll see if I can actually. I'm still learning how to work this whole podcast setup, but I'm gonna see if I can get a picture to throw him up there because he's obviously but he's super weird.
He's not just super weird. He is very literally a one of a kind animal. I have never seen, if you have the eye for the subtle things that we look at, because to some people a Texas rat snake and a copperhead look exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
If you have the eye that the things that we're looking at, that animal to me and to you, that is a one of a kind snake.
Yeah. And
I've never seen any other scrub python that looks anything like that at all, not even remotely, until his offspring. So, and clearly the phenotype that showed up first generation, which is what I love about scrub aberrancies. They're all like dominant traits. All of them, except for obviously Axanthic is the only one that seems to be recessive. All the striping and all the patternlessness and aberrant patterns, all that stuff, all the pattern mutations seem to be dominant. It's awesome.
Yeah, which is cool because that kind of takes away a level of extra work you gotta put into it, and I think that
prove it out.
I think that makes scrub breeding going forward interesting compared to some other species because we're not really working with many true morphs by the classical definition of them. So I think it's going to come down to a lot more of like kind of using that like specialist eye of like finding this little aberrancy that's different or this shade of gold in this bar neck that you haven't seen. Like the siblings to your girl that I kept from 2020. A few of them are going this like orange gold that I haven't really seen in many other bar necks. that is really intriguing me, because I have, you know, a handful of animals that I would consider gold, but it's a lot more of like yellow gold. So, you know, stuff like that definitely interests me.
I'm right with you though that the one of the ultimate goals for me with barneck breeding is to get there. There's that conundrum we're trying to overcome where gold looks really bad. Oh, there he is.
So before we go into the barneck talk, this is the male in question, the dad of the animal that you just saw Patrick pull out.
Jeez.
I mean, and that's obviously, for anyone who's listening, a top-down shot. He's very orange, but like he has that dark back color. But if you kind of look closely at the top third of the body, it's a lot of striping and weird, irregular manners. So yeah, he's just, and I'm super happy that he ended up being a phenomenal breeder. Because I mean, you never really know, especially with wild caughts. You know, it could go one of many different ways. He was, I think, the smallest male I've had breed, because the female was about 10 to 10 and a half feet at the time, and he was like pushing 7. He probably couldn't even take down a large rat if he tried. So that was pretty neat.
You know, we talk about this in the chondro talk a lot, and it's very true of chondros and of scrubs and lots of things that are less easy to breed. Everybody's always trying to pile up females, and that's a thing that comes from like ball python breeding culture, where you can breed one male to 76 females in 3 weeks or whatever. And with chondros and with scrubs, man, having serious studs, having males that are just going to get in there and get the job done, that's gold, dude. Like it's one of the most important things. Say that again.
In my adults, I like to have a 1-to-1 ratio. Especially as I'm still figuring everything out as far as breeding goes. You don't want to miss that moment when you needed that in there. And I've done that before, and I've deeply regretted not being able to get a male in 3 weeks sooner with a female, because that's when it needed to happen, and he was in another cage.
I always have pairings that I plan and I want to do, but every year with the green trees, I end up using different males on a significant percentage of the pairings, because the male that I wanted to use, his timing wasn't lining up when the female was ready. And I've heard it said by multiple people that if the female's developing, any male you throw in there is going to get on her. That is utter bullshit. It is absolutely untrue.
It is not. So, maybe with some colubrids or stuff that breeds more readily. Once you get into the more advanced stuff, that is certainly not the case. What
I was going to say about the barnet color is that
go for it.
We tend to get really high gold in the contrasty animals, but the muted pattern animals tend to also have muted ground color. And I know a goal that you and I share is to get the high gold ground color with the super reduced pattern. And you said it to me one day, but it's literally the exact thing that I've had in my mind for a very long time, is that what we want to go for is an animal that has the bold bar neck and some tail banding and nothing in between. That pattern, which that'll be easier to work towards. 1 or 2 generations of selective breeding for reduced pattern, you can swing that.
I produced 2 females in 2022, or holdbacks now, that past the neck bars, they don't have any melanin on their body. They have some pattern, but it's not a melanistic pattern. So I think to a male, like you were saying, might be the answer.
one more generation with that, and you can have that pattern. The trick is going to be getting that high gold ground color, because the higher gold is not just about how pretty the gold itself is. They have a different iridescence than the more muted animals do too. And while the high gold looks really badass in contrast with heavy black banding, like the rain line animals, it also looks badass with absolutely reduced black. too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So what else do I have over here? I have 2 female second generation Southern outcrosses. I bought 7 animals that were produced by Nick Bockelman. Not a whole lot of F2 scrubs floating around anywhere.
Yeah,
And
at best. Yeah.
so Andy at Ultimate Pets, I think is the name of his shop down there, or the shop he works at in Houston. He sold this. The backstory on those, from what I remember, I could dig all this up. He sold a pair of scrubs to somebody. The male was aberrant. The female was classic Southerns. They cohabbed them in a massive enclosure. They got a clutch of eggs, didn't know what to do with them, so they brought them up to the shop and he incubated them for them. And Nick Bockelman got a pair of aberrant siblings from that clutch and raised them up. And he cohabbed them in a massive enclosure, and they produced a clutch for him. And I bought 7 of those babies. And so if I remember correctly, all the ones that you ended up with were either ones that I sold to you or ones that I sold to somebody else that then sold them to you, I think. Yeah, four maybe.
I got a pair. I traded you the chondro. I got the pair.
Chondro for a pair.
And I received 2 more females a few years later. And subsequently, I've sold one of the females to a friend of mine. So I have a trio of that left, and then he's already. I don't know if Calvin, if you're listening or not, but he's already gotten action out of his girl. He's gotten copulations and stuff like that. So
badass.
They're of that age. They're of that age. No luck for me this year, but I did get lockups with one of the females, but she reabsorbed.
Yeah, that's we already talked about this, but that aberrant pattern is dominant as well. And getting one of those girls with your aberrant Highland male is going to be unreal, dude.
Yeah.
Because they have the most extreme version of that is kind of a granite look.
That's what I call them. I call them granite Southerns.
Yeah. Yep. And it's super, super cool. So I have 2 from that clutch still, 2 adult females. One of them they turned 5 in September, and one of them's about 8 feet long, and one of them's about 6.5, 7 foot. She was kind of a runt when I got him, and a little bit of a problem feeder, the only one that was kind of finicky. I have a captive bred female Southern that I got from you. That's from that clutch from David Means.
Yep.
Super special animal. She's unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah.
Also kind of what we're calling them Highland outcrosses, the same as the F2s. And then I have 1 pair of wild caught Southerns. The male was sent to me by Brian Fisher. Brian is Front Range Arboreals. He's in the chat right now. Brian's a dear friend of mine, and he's got a really badass collection. He's got Halmaheras and Timors and Bolins and badass Chondros and just all kinds of cool shit over there. And he's I'm expecting some cool success from him over the next couple of years with some of the shit he's working with. But anyways, he sent me a Highland male. Basically just gave him to me. I'll send him back some babies type of thing. And then I have a Highland female that Sean Beck bought from Jimmy Ma and had her sent here to breed. And she is one of the best looking Southern scrubs I've ever seen in my life. She is just
phenomenal.
Utterly. I can't call her patternless. She's not patternless, but she doesn't have any dark pattern anywhere on her body. She's just completely patterned in gold and orange.
Yeah.
And not just like the blotches on the side. She has orange over her entire body, and her iridescence is just unreal. She's one of the coolest scrubs I've ever seen. So that'd be a cool pairing. That's the only wild caughts that I have. It's just those two. And then lastly, I have a pair of captive bred Moluccan pythons.
Yeah.
They are siblings. They're clutch mates from the clutch that Marcel produced. The male they were his two favorites. I got his two best holdbacks. The male is strangely much larger than the female, even though I've had them on the exact same feeding schedule. And he was slightly larger when I got them, but he's continued to outpace her, eating the exact same thing. I feed them the same thing every time. And he's just continually outpacing her growth rate. He's one of the best looking Axanthics I've ever seen. I really should take pictures of him. He looks like a ghost. He's got bright white tail banding, and he's just silver and blue and white. He's just unbelievable.
Yep.
And then his sister, the kind of classic green and gold Moluccan. So little side note on that clutch right there. I don't know if Marcel's listening to this, and I hope he doesn't feel like I'm calling him out a little bit, because I'm not, just stating some facts. That was his first time like breeding almost anything.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, he had some experience with snakes. He'd been keeping snakes for many years, since he was a child, from what I understand. But I don't know if he had ever bred anything before that. And again, I'm not talking trash. I'm just stating facts. I saw Brandon Wheeler, if you're still in here, Brandon, congratulating him. We all knew we're watching in the Clasto group, right? Everybody's like watching and waiting to see what happens.
Yeah.
So I knew it was coming. It's obvious that she was going through all the moves. I knew she was going to lay fertile eggs.
Yeah.
I see Brandon, and I don't know Marcel, and I see Brandon posting it on his Instagram that he's going to go live or something with Marcel, or they're going to be on a podcast together, something like that, to talk about his recent clutch. And I'm busy as shit. I had lost track. I didn't know like what the timing was or when the eggs were expected, but I had been waiting and watching, and I kind of forgot. And I was like, oh shit. I messaged Marcel on this, like literally the Instagram story is still playing, and I'm messaging Marcel, and I said, show me your incubator setup. And he shows it to me. And I took a little bit of a risk because I don't know him, and a lot of people are sensitive to criticism.
Yeah.
And, you have to be really careful, especially in public, when you're trying to help somebody in comments on a thread or whatever. It's hard to convey your message properly through words, and people get defensive easily sometimes, and they become unreceptive to the help that you're trying to give. When you're genuinely trying to help, for all you assholes out there that aren't actually trying to help people and like to, look, I love all you guys, but I'm sure there's at least one of you in the watching this video right now that's one of those assholes that just likes to get on and say smart ass shit and not be helpful and bash people. Anytime anybody go ahead.
On that note, today I was on Facebook. I think it was on like the Morelia Viridis forum page. Somebody in Borneo posted a picture of a green tree python that was like in like a patio, like an exposed patio, in like kind of like a bird cage. And and I saw an angry reaction on the picture. I'm like, do you know where Borneo is? Yeah. You know the climate of Borneo? So I would keep that snake outside is better than you could ever do it inside.
Yes. If I lived over there, I would keep all my chondros outside in mesh cages. 100%. And I'd probably have one in a fucking bird cage on my patio just to piss somebody off.
Do a little bit of, look at the situation for a second before you take action that way, because you made yourself a total ass.
Yeah, lots of people just like to jump on and talk a lot of shit, and it deters people from asking questions, which is fucked up. We need to be able to ask questions. Motherfucker, you weren't born with all that knowledge either. You're just parroting it from somebody else you heard it from. Most of the people that open their mouths in these situations don't even have any legitimate level of experience. they're just repeating shit that sounded good or that the person that they like said or whatever without even knowing what they're talking about. One of the worst things that I see, and people that I absolutely adore are really guilty of this all the time, in addition to a bunch of jackasses. Oh, that's cool to know.
Yeah.
They answer questions without any context. They just give, yeah, that's very true, Brian. Very, very true. It happens on both ends. It deters the old school guys and the new keepers, and all of that is bad because we need the old school guys around for their knowledge and experience and wisdom to help all of the constant stream of new keepers. And instead, you got a bunch of assholes in the middle, talking shit in the comments and running people off. So
I'll stop.
You have to
comments for a little bit now.
No, it's all right. The problem is that you can't just give single digit, like single number temperature answers, for example, without context. I don't spend enough time helping people in the comments as I do. I do it mostly as I should. I do it mostly privately. Most of the help that I give people is private, and it's all day, every day with me. But when I do jump into the comments, somebody asks a question. If they don't have like a big long paragraph explaining all their parameters, which the assholes tend to ignore and talk a bunch of shit without even reading the whole thing. They look at the picture and talk shit about their Exoterra and their heat light or whatever.
Yep.
And I come in when they ask a question and I ask 6 more questions, right? How big is the cage? How old is the animal? What's the ambient room temperature? What's the gradient that you currently are experiencing? We're talking about temperature related stuff, right? Those type of questions. And yeah, you have to know the context before you answer all that stuff. But
yep.
Anyways, my point in saying all that, sorry about my tangent, is that I tend to approach those situations sensitively when I'm trying to help, and so that somebody doesn't get defensive and become unreceptive, because then my help means nothing. People will wall off and they won't listen to you anymore.
Yeah.
I messaged Marcel and I said, show me your incubator setup. And he sent me a picture, and I took a deep breath and I typed, you're going to kill that entire clutch. And I said, they're all going to cook in that setup. Please let me help you fix it. And he said, what do I do, bro? And this dude was ordering shit on Amazon, as like literally he's sending me screenshots, ordering the things I'm telling him to get, like in real time. He did literally everything that I said on the spot, completely redid everything. I even gave him the parameters for how to move them from one to the other, what to do in the meantime, because they weren't at risk of dying immediately. They were at the worst risk of dying later in the stages, because he had them in a small box with all the eggs clustered together, huge eggs, big clutch, 17 eggs or something like that?
It was a lot.
In a small incubator. And the problem, as we know, is that they will gradually generate heat as it goes on, especially when they're all in a cluster and mom is not there to loosen her coils and regulate that temperature. And in the later stages, they will all die because of the level of heat that they're generating.
Yep.
We can get to more on the incubation thing, because you and I know you've heard the story about David's clutches and the help that Tracy Barker gave us back in the day. Yep. And this is just me paying all that shit forward. And Marcel did everything that I said right on the spot, which doesn't happen. A lot of people reach out and ask for help and don't listen.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong, but he may have gotten 100% hatch rate on that clutch.
It was, if it wasn't 100, it was most of them.
Real close, 15 or 16 out of 17 or whatever. 100% are real close.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking credit for his success. He's the one that bred the snakes, but I helped him not fuck the clutch off, and give him all the credit for getting to the point and for listening to all the shit that I told him. And it worked out. And I am super stoked to have gotten his best 2 holdbacks. He had to get out due to some health issues that he was having, and I got his best 2 holdbacks from that clutch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that instance, there's a lot to say from it. For one, it was incredible that he was able to do that. And, I have a female from that clutch too. She's perfect. I think it also speaks to these snakes not being quite so impossible to breed as some of the pioneers of the field would have you think. I think it has a lot more to do with how you get your animals to the point of breeding. His animals were in great shape, and I think that coupled with his consistency of how he kept them resulted in success. Kind of speak on that if you want in terms of scrubs or any snakes. I think that instance really told us a lot about reproduction of pythons in general.
Yeah. Well, and he didn't have a huge collection, and he focused a lot of his attention on that single pair of snakes.
Yep.
So that's good stuff. We're like approaching the 1 hour mark. Do you have more scrub stuff do you want to talk about, or because I know you kind of have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing we can touch on before we switch topics, I've only been into this scrubs for about 7 years, which is not, not that much time in the grand scheme of things. You've been around them and have kept them a lot longer than I have. Kind of, how have you seen the way that scrubs are portrayed in captivity, how the market has changed, the kind of the stigma of their aggression? How have you seen some of that chatter in the community evolve over the years with scrub pythons? Where did they start off, and where do you think they are now?
Sure. So we've already kind of touched on that a little bit. They used to be super cheap back in the day. Everybody thought they were super mean snakes. Any scrub python can be defensive under certain circumstances. And there is a huge range of, they're complex animals. So there's a huge range of temperaments in scrubs. There are some scrubs that, even as adults, no matter your level of experience, can be very, very tricky to manage. And so what I would like to say, first off, that no matter, I'm about to say a bunch of good things about them, but first I'd like to say that no matter what, no matter how calm and how sweet that animal is, an adult southern or barneck, maybe even a big Moluccan, that is a very, very dangerous animal. Like, that is an animal that can change your whole life if something were to go wrong. But so is every big retic or berm. Even big blood pythons could put you in the ER if they lit you up with a real good feeding response.
Pythons with heads bigger than the biggest scrub pythons I've kept.
Yes, exactly. So, any big snake is a very, very dangerous predator. If you look at the things that they take down in the wild, and retics we don't talk about as much because most of the adult retics are, well, most of them don't make it to adulthood, but that's a different conversation. Most of them, these big sloppy fat things, if you see what wild retics look like, they more resemble, until they get past about the 15-foot range, they more resemble scrub pythons in their physique.
For sure.
Very, very slender, very arboreal, very muscular, and very capable. And these animals in the wild can take down massive prey. Scrubs kill fucking kangaroos in Australia, dude. They're monstrous animals. All that being said, as long as you understand that as a baseline for keeping large snakes, I have never had a scrub that was unmanageable for me. Never. I've never had one that I thought, I can't deal with this animal.
Yeah.
My biggest southern female now, she's a very defensive snake. And her feeding response is crazy, but she's actually there's a huge difference between feeding response and being defensive. That's a very important distinction that should always be made with any python. damn near every python that I keep, especially any female, has a wicked feeding response after lights go out. If I put my hand in the cage, I am getting bit, period. If I open a cage at night and stick my hand in there, I'm going to get nailed.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. Very few of my snakes, even all my Biot chondros that have a terrible reputation for being horribly aggressive animals, I can put my hands on any one of them. Any one of them. A couple of them are still kind of nasty. They tend to calm down in my care. Scrubs are the same way. They tend to be aggressive as juveniles. They tend to, aggressive is not the right word. They tend to be defensive as juveniles.
Yeah.
Fresh imports can be defensive. But if you provide them with a situation where they're able to feel calm and secure, and if you understand how to move around them and to have your energy calm and for you to feel secure, if you're scared and you don't know what you're doing, very literal, I don't mean this in like a woohoo way, your vibrations, your actual vibrations and your actual energy are different, and it makes them uncomfortable. And that can be said of basically any animal.
Yep.
So, if you're able to move around them calmly, you're able to support them physically the way that they need to be supported without feeling unsafe. It's a learning curve, but they don't have to be dangerous. They're all manageable. And the vast majority of the ones that I've kept have been very sweet, very easy to deal with animals. The way that things have changed have been by people saying those things after they've gained the experience with them. And almost anybody that I know that has a decent level of experience with them has had some kind of bad or scary situation occur. I could tell you some wild and hilarious stories about certain things, but maybe some of them aren't my place to share. It's because of the keeper's mistake. It's always the keeper's fault, but usually it's because of some dumb mistake or whatever.
Sure.
Especially around feeding time.
Yep.
Back in the day, nobody wanted them. All of them were cheap. We see them with their jungle skin on coming in and emaciated and all that stuff because the exporters didn't know how to give them a soak or whatever. They always had mites and they were always, the snake is uncomfortable. It's dehydrated and got mites all over it and been shipped all over the world. And it's, they're in rough shape. Now we have lots of captive bred animals. We know how to acclimate wild caughts.
Yep.
In my experience, with the exception of halmaheras, which they just seem to be a little more shy and a little more sensitive than other scrubs. And I'm not saying that they're sensitive snakes. I'm just saying that relative to other scrubs, hounds seem to be a little more shy, a little more sensitive. With the exception of halmaheras, wild-caught scrubs, to me, are one of the easiest snakes to acclimate.
Yeah, I would add peacocks in that definition, but aside from that, I completely agree.
Yeah, I have zero experience with them, so... with the Biot scrubs, I have 900 million Biot chondros.
Biot chondros? Patrick Holmes has Biot chondros. That's news to me.
Yeah. The perception of them has largely changed. The market has blown me away. I remember seeing David Means selling captive bred barnecks in 2009 for $450, and I was like, this dude is smoking crack, thinking he's going to get $450 for a scrub python.
Yep.
But he did. And with the whole COVID pricing thing, that unfortunately unfortunately in my eyes, kind of coincided with larger availability of captive bred scrubs, which has been, you've played a huge role in that. But it seems like the market, I don't even like using that word, but has held pretty well. People aren't tripping over themselves to spend all their money on whatever like they were 3 years ago.
Sure.
But scrubs are pulling better prices consistently than I've ever seen before, and it's awesome because it's a lot of work that goes into producing these things. It's a
Yep.
lot of work, and it should be rewarded accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as someone who's doing it in principle, but I think for everyone else, even I'll speak beyond myself. To me, when a baby or a neonate captive bred scrub python in the hand, that animal is as far removed from that animal's wild counterpart as you can get. A baby scrub python that you get fresh on import and a baby scrub python that was produced in captivity are just,
Yeah.
there's night and day different animals that I think,
Mhm.
in my opinion now, some of the scrubs you see on MORPH market and, for sale on King Snake or Fauna or wherever, I think some of them are even still underpriced just based on what you were saying about what goes into those animals and the outcome in contrast to the wild caught counterpart that you could
Yeah.
get for significantly cheaper.
Yeah, I agree, and that's always kind of been a theme, like people choosing the cheaper wild caughts and captive bred stuff not getting the attention that they deserve. And it's been a cool shift over the last few years to finally see people really promoting, and not just breeders, like where the word is actually out. And this is with chondros, with viper species, all kinds of stuff where people are really like, go US captive bred, go with a reputable breeder.
Yeah.
I one time was at a Venomous show in San Antonio, and Jim Campbell from La Vibora was down there. And Jim is an old school viper breeder, man. He's been doing it forever.
Yep.
And he had captive bred eyelash vipers that were big, well-started babies eating large pinkies to fuzzies, golds, tigers. Yeah, that's all he had, table full of eyelash vipers. Glade's Herp had fresh jungle babies from wild caught females that were literally small enough to live in a 16-ounce deli cup. Like they were housing them in the deli cups that they were available for sale, and that's what they were housing them in. And it's not really even probably, they're really that small when they're born. You can literally house them in a 16-ounce deli cup.
I remember
they do just fine like that.
Like that long.
Yeah. And where they're eating pinky parts. And right. I watched Jim sit at through that entire show without selling a single snake. And people would come and talk to him, and then they'd go over to the Glade's Herp table and buy one of those tiny little things so they could save $50.
Right.
And which is a damn shame. And I've seen that happen with chondros. And when people used to actually bring captive bred chondros to shows, you'd see captive bred chondros for $400 or $500 on somebody's table, and somebody would rather go spend $250 on a scrawny mite covered biak that was fresh off the boat.
Yeah. For as many things that we can kind of complain about with social media, I think that we could probably associate the move towards captive bred. We could probably associate that a lot with the rise of social media, because
absolutely
that is so much more readily available to a new keeper that the person going to that show to buy that eyelash viper or to buy that green tree python, they've probably scrolled through the Facebook groups. They've probably seen some videos, and they've seen some people who have described their quote unquote horror stories of, or, like, this was my mistake of buying that wild caught. I ended up spending so much more and bought the captive bred anyway. I think that's one of the best benefits of social media is stories like that are so much more accessible to new keepers.
Yeah. Just as maybe we'll circle back around to this, but just as a
we can do it.
Side note, I think about 20 eyelash vipers in this room right now. So since we're talking about eyelash vipers, anyways, so yeah, if that answered your question about the change with the scrub python market and the move to captive bred, shall we mangrove it next?
Sure. Right before we move on, I have a couple questions from the chat I want to get to.
Okay.
So Lisa, Marcel's pair, the female was about 10 feet long, and I believe the male was maybe around 9. So kind of like average adult scrub size. And I think you guys touched on this briefly last Tuesday. You know, there's this kind of there's a theory or the kind of a sentiment that Moluccans, being an island type scrub or somehow or another like a dwarf species, by no means is that true. At least in my experience, I think they are. You know, and Patrick, tell me what you think about this, but my opinion is that they are the heaviest bodied of the scrub complex, King Horneye included, and that they are the same size as Amethystina, if not even a little bit larger. As an
I agree on the heavy body. They do seem to go a little heavier. I can't agree on the length, but only because of my lack of experience with Moluccan pythons. I've never had a big Moluccan python. I've only ever seen, you know, juveniles at shows and stuff like that. And this pair that I have now are the first ones that I've ever actually raised from. I didn't get them as babies, but raising from juveniles to now they're subadult size. Yeah. And I've seen some just ridiculously massive bar neck and southerns. David Means used to have a southern female that was every bit of 16 feet long. David is 6'2", and that snake, he'd take her out in the yard and she would, what do the ball python people call it? Periscoping. And lots of snakes do that. She would periscope and stand up and look him in the eyes. And he's 6'2". That snake was ridiculous. That's actually the snake that he tried first with the male that I sent him. She's the biggest non-King Horneye I've ever seen. That Kofiau male that you got from him, she was significantly larger than that animal.
Wow.
Yeah, significantly larger than him. Lengthwise,
what I've seen.
Yeah, she was lengthwise, maybe not too much longer, but quite a bit bulkier than him. So,
and that makes sense, you know, but female too.
Yeah, for sure. And there's always outliers, but I've seen over the years between photographs and in person and my animals, I've seen more than I can count off the top of my head, 12-foot plus bar necks and southerns, especially bar necks. And all the biggest class does I've seen were in the 9 to 10 foot range. So, you know, but they do seem to go, they get beefier heads. They're just heavier bodied in general, more like a more denser musculature. Yes. Yeah. For sure. Almost in the same way that a Boland's is.
They're very similar body structure wise to Boland's. Yeah. They're flatter from a vertical standpoint, I feel like, than bar necks and southerns.
Yeah.
So my biggest class does that I've had, I still have one of them now. We're both about 12 foot.
Really?
Both of their heads were bigger than that Kofiau. And you know, the female, I didn't raise these animals. I got them when they were already big.
I remember when you got them.
Yep. You feed her a mammoth rat, the biggest rat you can, and it doesn't leave a lump in her. She was a big animal. The guy who I got them from back in, I think like maybe around 2010 or a little earlier, got an animal from Tracy Barker that was fresh import. It was a female that he said was almost solid black and was over 13 feet long. And I have a male that I raised from a neonate alongside of 2 barnecks that I also acquired around the same size as neonates. I fed him the same way, raised him the same way, and he's probably about 6 inches to a foot longer than either barneck, and probably 25 to 35% girthier.
Heavier,
significantly larger head. And like you were saying, this is a very small sample size, but I think it's a big enough sample size to say that Moluccans are not the smaller scrub python that they're up there with Amethystina.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Nauta are by far the smallest, and then followed by Halmaheras. You know, supposedly the record. record for Halmahera is 16 feet, but again, outliers. There used to be a local guy here that had a helm that I never saw, but a lot of my friends saw it, and it was supposedly 13 feet long. This guy was a jackass. He tried to, I won't say his name, but this is many years ago, but he ripped off a bunch of local people and ripped off some people who are or have been well known in the scrub community, like Blake Bauer and David Means. And, but he put a male retic in with this Halmahera, wanted to try to create blasphemous monster mutts.
For anyone listening, this was before Halmaheras had been bred in captivity.
Yeah, this is a long time ago. And she fucking smoked him. Killed him immediately. He put a full-grown male retic in there. Yeah, and she fucking smoked him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fucking insane.
Yeah, she was a big Halmahera. So anyways, most of the hounds that I've seen were smaller snakes, 6 or 7 feet.
Yeah. So there's always outliers. And then the last one, so John says, when will there be designer scrubs? And honestly, based on our conversation earlier about the lack of locality data, you could say that they're designer scrubs now. That the Southerns from David, those are not pure locality. The Highlands from either me or James, we can't say that those are pure locality. The Barnecks, I think that unfortunately with the animals that we have in the States now, we have no choice but to breed them from a designer standpoint, because otherwise we wouldn't breed any of them. So
the definition, and you can argue maybe a little bit about this definition, but the definition of designer is simply that you are taking unusual traits and then selectively breeding to enhance those traits with a particular goal in mind. That's all a designer is. So you can have a designer that's a pure locality animal. Sure. We call leopard geckos designers because they're all the same fucking thing. We just bred them for a whole bunch of crazy different colors and patterns. Those are designers. Ball pythons are designers. They don't have to be different localities. With the scrubs, we have these animals like the granite F2s that we have, the weird striping that your male is passing on, patternless, other types of striping, the high orange. We're outcrossing these animals and picking out the funkiest stuff and trying to breed for those traits. I have never produced scrub pythons, but that's my goal with the animals that I have. And I've also never attempted to breed scrubs until just the other day. I threw a pair together for funsies. I say the other day, it's been a few weeks ago, but and the male I think is just a little young and a little small. But same thing with our Southerns. They could very well be called designers because we're breeding different animals together, going for crazy traits, right? So
I think
Brian's exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So, man, about an hour and 20 of scrub talk. I think that's more than you'll find many other places. On that topic, let's switch gears a little bit to something that we both near and dear, are the mangrove. I currently don't have any mangrove snakes. I hope to change that hopefully this year. But they're, you speak on them. You're the mangrove guy. To me, there's nothing else like them. But to me, they stand alone.
I agree completely. I think they are the whole genus, but like all of Boiga are cool, and they're kind of a very unique genus. There's just not really other snakes that have the same movement and body structure as they do, and even that's pretty variable. But there's like these kind of across the board similarities in the way that they move and their physique. They're all long and slender and muscular with big heads. They're all rear fang venomous. The array of colors across the entire genus is like damn near infinite. Like they just come in like just endless colors and patterns. And I like some of the others. I like most of them. I think neonate cynodon are some of the prettiest snakes, period. They're
Yeah.
just they're unbelievably beautiful, even though the colors are drab. The arrangement of that gray brown mix is just unbelievably beautiful. Cyanea, a large adult cyanea is just an
Very impressive.
unbelievably impressive animal, especially when they lean a little blue. Man, unbelievable. If I ever keep any non-mangrove boiga, that'll be it for sure. Um, uh, I agree that the Jimmy Cincta are one of my three favorites. I have trouble like claiming a favorite, but I kind of have to claim the
Oh, come
divergence.
on. You can't say you have trouble with that one. You're the
I do.
you're the
I have
divergent.
a lot of divergence, but I'm going to show you something. This girl's probably ready to rock and roll right now, so I'm going to try to.
YouTube.
These guys are just like it's just like the scrubs. What nobody saw on camera when I pulled those scrubs out earlier is that while the lights are on, it's after dark here, and the lights are less important to them as the timing. They're dialed in. They know it's nighttime. I had to take a very slow approach. The bar neck was easier because he was on a perch, so I could just pull the perch out. But the little southern, I had to pull him off. He just has cardboard egg crates stacked up in there to hang out on. I had to pull him off of that fresh out of the shed. And, it's a little bit careful to get him out without getting tagged. This little girl right here is watching me very, very closely. And she is ready to flip her switch. And anybody who has experience with boiga knows about the boiga switch. So right now she's in her little deli cup. I like to give young mangroves a deli cup full of sphagnum moss in their enclosure. It just helps keep the humidity up, and sometimes they like to dig down into it for security. And I've noticed better feeding in juveniles when they have that little bit of it's what Quetzal calls contact security, right? So a little bit of texture and something to get into. But she's just ready to go full shit show on me at any point. This is my Melanota female, and you're seeing her underside. That's the most yellow that she has. She is super reduced.
Yeah,
she's actually a really really high black.
I love that.
Very reduced pattern.
She's the perfect Melanota.
So she is, and she's perfect. And I'm gonna get a male just like this for her eventually. The only Melanota to me that are as cool as this are the striped ones, and there's a couple of those in the country. So I'm hoping that people will have some success with those, so that I can buy some captive bred.
Yes.
Right. So can you see the way she's standing up? The defensive posture of a mangrove snake is the fucking coolest thing ever. I don't know if you can see her wagging her tail, standing up. She's gaping, and I don't know if it's showing up on camera, her opening her mouth at me.
Well, it is. She did it right as you said it. It was almost like you guys into this.
So what you definitely can't see is her iridescence. These things are unbelievably iridescent. Melanota were my first captive bred mangrove snakes. I don't know how to pronounce Doug's last name, and I know Alexander England left me a voice message telling me how to pronounce his last name, but I was already on when the message came in. So, but Doug, his last name is spelled Hotle. I don't know if he pronounces it Hodel or I'm not sure how Doug pronounces his last name. I got my first captive bred Melanota from Doug in 2008, probably. And I think I paid $90 for them for captive bred Melanota.
Yeah.
I bought a holdback from him once for $125. Their Melanota are massive. they're heavy bodied. They can get 8 feet long. They're just super impressive. And that ringed black and yellow look is something that, like, anybody who's into snakes and has seen this snake in a book or whatever is like, holy shit, that thing is unbelievable. And now we can see them all over social media and whatnot.
Yep.
But the standing defensive pattern of any mangrove snake, it's just the coolest thing ever. My favorite snake image of all time, my favorite snake photograph ever, and this is coming from somebody who's looked at literally tens and tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of snake photos in his life. The coolest image I've ever seen was taken in my living room, and it's my background screen. My background screen on my computer, and it's one of my divergents standing up in a defensive posture.
Wow.
So Melanota were my first love. Alexander England will tell you they're the best mangroves. On average, I actually like Melanota better than divergence, but exceptional divergence, because they're highly variable. The divergence are in the amount of blue that they can have, and how muddied their bands are.
Yeah.
And there's sexual dimorphism there, but it's not 100% consistent. We do see muddy males on occasion, and we occasionally see high contrast females.
Yeah.
But largely, sorry. I've been keeping these things since 2005 or something, and I never get over their defensive posture. It's just the coolest thing ever. I'm gonna quit fucking with her being a meme. So really, really exceptional divergence to me are one of the most beautiful snakes on the planet. It's not just the I'm struggling to find the words. There's not a cooler snake. It's hard to say any one snake is the most beautiful snake in the world. It's like the same thing with like people or whatever. Like the whole bunch of different opinions about it or whatever. To me, there is not a cooler snake than a really exceptional divergence. Divergence are the Luzon mangrove snakes. Oh, Jesus. I don't know what I'm doing in here tonight, guys. They are, the Philippines is like 7,100 islands or something like that. And second largest archipelago on Earth after Indonesia, which is like 13,000 islands. There is an island in the Philippines called Luzon. That's where these are native to. And then there's a smaller island off the coast of Luzon that is called Polio. And supposedly these animals are polio locality divergence. They were produced originally. My original stock was produced at the Tula Zoo in Russia.
Okay.
And they are unbelievable animals.
Good.
So, I mean, the contrast of blue and yellow, it's one of my favorite things in a green tree python that has lots of blue and yellow. The contrast that blue and yellow creates is just unreal. And you guys saw how long it took me to get this animal out. You can approach these animals carefully and not necessarily get nailed.
Yeah.
But they are venomous. I don't mess with them too much. They all hate me. Divergence are, in my experience, the most defensive mangrove snakes. They're the easiest ones to get them to flip the switch. The switch that I'm referring to is that many mangrove snakes can be corn snake tame. And then once that switch flips, they go full on shit show. There's like no gray area.
Nope.
Maybe 5 to 10% of mangrove snakes will ever exhibit a gray area. They're super calm, or they're ready to rock and roll. And so this is a female from my first clutch of divergence. I was the second
for everybody.
So November 2022, and she is well past due for an upgrade in her enclosure size. I actually have one in the living room. I think I may put one of my babies on display in my living room.
Hell yeah.
I raise everything starts out in 6-quart shoe boxes, and they go to 15-quart shoe boxes, and then they go to 56 or 66 or 132 quart tubs, and then they go to PVC or vision cages. I keep all of my adult Boiga are in vision cages, and so I got my original male from Anders in trade for a chondro. My original male is actually the first divergence I ever saw anywhere. I didn't know they existed.
Wow.
And
Jordan
Russell Jordan Russell brought some in. Yeah, especially considering I've been keeping mangrove snakes for so long. But the Philippines stopped exporting a long time ago, and nobody had divergence in the U.S. Tula Zoo got a hold of some and was breeding them in Russia. Jordan Russell brought in 1 pair of them with a shipment of other Boiga in 2017, I believe. Okay. And I saw them on his Instagram when I was like new on Instagram, and I was like, holy shit, that's the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. And that's a juvenile that hadn't even started to color up yet. It was still just a little bit of blue. And so when they were $3,500 a pair, I didn't have the money. And one of my buddies bought them, who was in Southern California, and he unfortunately, due to just an accident, lost the female, and offered me the male in trade for a chondro, and I gladly did that. And he ended up with a really nice animal for my first clutch, so sibling to Hellboy and the Void and all that. I'm going to go ahead and put this animal back to amazing that I didn't get nailed. But so I got that male. He was at that point like 3 feet long, and I've seen some nicer ones in photos, or I don't want to say nicer. I've seen, because there's some variability, but I've seen a 3 or 4 in photos that were as nice as him, including 2 females, strangely. One that Kevin McCurley has or used to have. But Kevin was the first person to breed them in 2019.
Okay.
My male was still maturing at that point. And that's when I got him, was real late 2019.
Okay.
Kevin McCurley got a couple of clutches, because the Boiga will, at least the mangroves will double and triple, sometimes quadruple clutch. So I know he got some eggs, but Kevin also apparently kept feeding males to that giant female that he had. Mangrove snakes will cannibalize, especially if the female is larger. Something that seems to be common in a lot of colubrids, especially depending on how you address feeding. Males can absolutely be bigger. And so you can manage their feeding if you're raising the animals yourself, so that your males are larger. Males will eat.
I think that perfectly kind of translates into this question that Timothy has here.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's a great question. So Dan Malari, shout out to Dan, because Dan is into all of the shit that we're talking about, Boiga and scrub pythons and big arboreal colubrids. Dan has like the same taste in stuff that you and I do. He's actually chondro head too. He just doesn't talk about it a whole lot. Dan actually got me this shirt. I wore this on a different podcast one time, but this is a Calzoo shirt. And Dan is who I got that Melanota female from. He produced her in Malaysia from Aberrant Parents. Okay. And I saw Dan wearing this shirt in one of his videos, and I messaged him while I was watching the video. I was like, I need that Calzoo shirt. And I got on their site, and it wasn't on their site. And I bought that Melanota female from him. And when I got the box, I opened it up, and this shirt was in there with her.
Perfect.
So shout out to Dan for hooking me up on the shirt and hooking me up on that badass mangrove snake. Yeah. He had her listed at $750, and I didn't try to talk him down or anything. I just jumped out and grabbed her. Yeah. Like I say, Kevin was the first person to do it, but kept feeding his females to his males, or feeding his males to his female, giant female. Y'all have probably seen pictures of Tara Byron holding her. Dan likes to palpate them for follicles before pairing.
Okay.
Because it is much more likely that a cannibalism event is going to occur if the female is not ready to breed. She's much less likely to try to eat the male.
Yeah.
If she's not ready to go. The problem with that lies in females that are way bigger than males. I've heard of the Black Widow thing occurring on multiple occasions, where a really large female was paired with a really small male. She was developing follicles. They were paired. They bred. Mangrove snakes are one and done. They can lock up one time. I got 3 clutches for the first time that I bred them. I got 3 clutches from one single copulation. They locked up one time, and I got 3 clutches out of it over the period of a year. And right about once every 4 months, right when the first one was supposed to be hatching, she's laying another clutch. So the bigger females, it's like they eat the male afterwards to have that energy for the subsequent egg production. So to me, it is important to palpate them for follicles. I have paired up snakes where I didn't clearly feel follicles, but I kind of supervised it, managed the timing. It's a good idea to spray them down. I like to do daytime or like late afternoon or even morning introductions. I will mist the female before I put her in, and it'll either turn off her feeding response or it'll piss her off, but defensive is way better. It's fine if she nails the male defensively. It's not cool if she grabs him out of a feeding response.
Right.
Misting the animals will turn off their feeding response. I've only ever had one attempted cannibalism, and it was with my smallest pair of divergens. They're axanthic, and the female is bigger than the male, but not very much so. Okay. And I had paired them in the morning, and I went to work, and when I came home, the female had the male's head in her mouth and had him wrapped up. And but he was just too big. He was fighting her too hard, and I pulled his head out of her mouth, and he was no worse for the wear. And I mean, she was full on rear fangs embedded in his flesh, foaming. Like they'll foam when they're like getting a deep envenomation. Their mouth will foam up, and had her tail all wrapped around him, like she was full on trying to kill him and eat him, and it did nothing to him. It had zero impact on him other than the minor stress of me pulling him out of her mouth. And he was more pissed off at me for handling him and putting him back in his cage than he was about getting eaten, apparently. So he's also hyper defensive. He's maybe my not the worst one I've had, but the hardest to calm down
Okay.
of all the ones that I've had. But anyways, that's the only cannibalism attempt that I've had. I've paired up Jimmy Cincta quite a few times, and have had my smaller male Jimmy Cincta bite down on the female, but I think that was more of a breeding thing. We see that in bull snakes and other colubrids sometimes.
For sure.
I also had my big divergence male bit himself one time when he was courting or maybe breeding one of my females. On that subject, that's a behavior that I've seen them exhibit multiple times under various circumstances. I saw him biting himself there. I saw somebody messaged me yesterday, said that they had a melanota female that was chewing on her own tail. I walked in one time and slid a tub, and one of my juvenile divergents had his body in his mouth while he was shedding. And it was a light bulb moment for me, because I would come in and their sheds were always like in pieces and crumbled up in a weird texture. And I couldn't figure it out, because I'm like, these snakes would never have stuck shed. They're always perfectly hydrated. There's never any issue. And I realized at that moment, these snakes have been eating their sheds. And that's why I'm not, because he's having a full perfect shed, and they never looked like that in the tub. They were eating their sheds and then passing them, and still kind of looking like shed, just in chunks.
Wow.
So, yep. And my big divergence male consumed an entire shed of the female that I had paired with him. I threw her shed in the enclosure to like stimulate him to breed. And I have a video of him finishing. I walked in and he was finishing eating her entire shed. Here's the real interesting thing. I've not really seen much of that behavior in the ones that I produce. That's mostly been in the ones that were produced from Tula Zoo, and never seen them exhibit it past subadult stage. They all kind of grew out of it. I told Dan about that. Dan has tons of Boiga experience, and it was a new thing to him. And he messaged me right after I sold him a pair of subadults and said that one of them had just eaten the shed, and he was laughing about it. And but they grow out of it, and other than eating their own sheds, but apparently, like I say, that one time my male ate the entire shed of that female. Sorry, I'm checking a message. Good night, Amber, if you're still watching. I don't think she's still watching, but yeah, so the shed eating thing is really weird. I wonder if there's some kind of nutritional factor there, because it's really strange to me that the ones from the zoo exhibited the behavior extensively, but I've barely seen it at all in the ones that I produce. So yeah, the cannibalism is a real thing, and I think I went over all the precautions that I take: palpate for follicles, mist the animals, supervise. But if you're raising them yourself, it's not hard to get the males bigger than the females, or at least the same size. They grow at a ridiculous rate if you feed the shit out of them, which I think that's another subject we want to talk about, is feeding the shit out of juvenile snakes. But yeah, the Boiga are they're not difficult to keep. If you get captive, wild caught can be total shit shows, and especially Dendrophila, they'll have every problem in the book. Wild caught melanota are easier to acclimate, much easier, and easier to get feeding. But there's enough people breeding them where, if you pay attention, especially people are importing babies from other countries that were produced, captive bred babies from the UK and from Russia, and then people breeding them here. Captive bred mangrove snakes, every once in a while they can get some little skin things that maybe are related to too much moisture or whatever. I haven't really had much issue with that, but they're just solid animals, man.
Yeah.
They're highly active. They're arboreal. They like elevated hides. Um, Jimmy Cincta, juvenile Jimmy Cincta, I've set them up in naturalistic enclosures, and they not only are they arboreal, they are phenomenal swimmers. They will retreat to water like a water snake does. They'll dive off of a branch into the water. In the wild, they'll dive off and take off across the top of the water, but they can go straight down to the bottom the way Nerodia will when they jump off of a willow branch around a pond or whatever. They can go straight to the bottom. They're powerful swimmers. I suspect, and I've read this, I suspect that they hunt fish and crabs underwater in mangrove swamps. I think that wild mangrove snakes eat literally anything, including each other. I think they eat birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, crabs, mammals. I think they eat everything. You know, I've also seen fossorial behavior out of juvenile Jimmy Cincta when they had deep substrate. And when I say fossorial, I don't mean digging down into the substrate. I mean legitimate burrowing behavior, where I've had baby Jimmy Cincta construct burrows and know where they were at. And you walk in and go to mess with them and they dive off. I used to have one baby that it would either dive into its huge water bowl and curl up on the bottom and look up and wait, or it would dive off into a tunnel that it created in the sphagnum moss and knew exactly where they were. And I could replace the moss and it would dig the tunnels out again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I in like giant clear, like polycarbonate tubs. So I could lift it up and look underneath and see the tunnels in the substrate. So really fascinating behavior with mangrove snakes all the way around. Their defensive behaviors, their breeding behaviors. They're just big and active, and they're super impressive display animals. One more note I can make on keeping them is the venom thing. Again, they are venomous. I have been bitten by Dendrophila, Melanota, Jimmy Cincta, and Divergens. I've been bitten a million times by juveniles. I don't treat the juveniles any different. I treat them like everything else. I don't treat them like they're venomous. The male that I sold to Dan has probably bit me more than any one snake I've ever kept in my life, because he was just this monster.
Yeah.
And but once they hit, well, about the size of the one that I pulled out a minute ago, that's when I start actively really trying to avoid bites. I know I was just handling one with my hands. I still handle my adults. So sometimes I grab a hook on them, depending on what kind of mood they're in or where they're at. A lot of times they're stuffed into a cork bark tube, and I just move the tube. I put cork tubes in like everything.
Yeah.
Scrubs, Amazons, Boiga. Pull the tube out because they're usually asleep in it during the day, and do my cage maintenance. Makes life real easy. But yeah, once they start hitting this like adult mouse eater size, I start trying to avoid bites. I've been bitten by large adults. I've never had a reaction, but I've never let one chew on me.
Yeah.
That's a problem. We see that with garter snakes and hognose snakes, people having terrifying reactions. Don't let them fucking chew on you, man. If that snake bites you, tear it off. Don't let it chew on you. That's when it's problematic.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, very well said. I think the last thing I want to kind of touch on. Babies historically are difficult to establish feeding. Would you agree with that?
I've had kind of mixed experience with that. I wouldn't say difficult. I'm a fucking chondro breeder, dude. Like, to me, there's not really anything that's much more difficult than. And I've had clutches of chondros where the whole clutch is the easy starters, but bad baby chondros are like they're the worst thing to me.
Yeah.
And had a couple of arboreal viper species that were kind of in the same neighborhood of being difficult. The thing about the mangroves is that they're super easy to assist feed. Okay. And you sometimes have to start off with force feeding, then assist feeding. I'm not scared of force feeding and assist feeding by any means. It's a important tool in my arsenal for establishing certain species.
Yeah.
I have, when I got all my original group of juvenile divergens, my buddy Nick Method reached out to me and he saw that Ashley had a bunch for sale that she just brought in from Russia. And he knew that I had a male already. And he was like, dude, should we get a group of these? Like, how long are these going to keep coming in from Russia? Should we get a group of these and raise them up? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So that's when I got my adult female and we bought 10 juveniles. So at that point I had 12 divergens, which wow. I'm still unaware of any. That's until real recent. At one point, it's still the highest number I've ever had, but I don't think anybody else in the States has ever had 12 at one point in time. And Ashley told me that it would take a really long time to get them eating off of tongs, and just to prove her wrong. It wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about showing myself that I could do it. I think I got 6 out of 8 to eat pinkies off of tongs first try. I did not have that same experience with the babies that I produced. And I've had the range of experiences with all baby Boiga. I've had some that ate either off of tongs or ate a frozen thawed or live left in the enclosure the first time that I did it. Force feeding, I use a mouse thigh, the same thing I do for chondros. And what I found is that the difference between force and assist feeding is that you're actually like force feeding it like all the way down the throat, massaging it down. Right. I found that if I could get the leg just down the throat long enough or far enough to pinch here and kind of lodge it just past the jaw and let go, and they would swallow it. It takes seconds to do it. Yeah. After 2 or 3 of those, I could start sticking a pinky head in their mouth, a whole pinky, just stick the head in their mouth. And sometimes you have to hold them. Sometimes you can get them back into the enclosure and then they'll just swallow it. And then I'll feed them every like 3 to 7 days, depending on what my schedule is in the room. And every like second or third feeding, I just toss a live or a frozen thawed pinky in their tub overnight and see if they'll take it. And eventually they'll just start taking them. My favorite one from my first clutch, though, she took several months. I had to force feed or assist feed that animal. She assist fed really easily, but would only take pinkies. So I had to feed her like 3 pinkies in a row twice a week. She was that big that, and then one day she ate a live fuzzy and 2 more of those, and she started taking frozen thawed. Now she's catching up.
Awesome. So when you were talking earlier about them eating their own sheds, it kind of, in my mind, I was like, maybe that's a trick for tricky babies, is getting like shed from an older animal and wrapping it around the pinky. Have you ever tried that?
I have not tried that. And that's a trick that I've used with other species where I've tried like gotten shed from a crested gecko or whatever. And I've had not a lot of luck trying that. It makes a lot of sense, and I know people that have had luck trying that. But hopefully I'll produce some more this year, and if any of them are problematic, it is potentially something I could try. I would probably like just wrap the pinky in the shed and leave it in there and see what happens. So
well, on that topic, let's transition over to the feeding talk. When that kind of, it came up in the episode last week. But when I heard it, I really kind of sparked me for like, okay, this is definitely a topic we can dive into, because I feel like we have similar philosophies of feeding, where, the old guard, so to speak, was feed the animals a lot. And then this kind of newer school mentality came in probably around 2016, 2017 of we overfeed our animals, cut back dramatically. That was taken too far. What's your kind of philosophy with feeding? How do you approach that with the different species you keep?
Sure. So I agree with that completely. And I'm going to try to tie in, because there's a question in the chat about talking about squams and insularis. And as a side note, I have 1 pair of blue insularis, and I have a a shitload of squams, a lot of squams. We got rid of a lot of the squams. At one point I had like 55 squams or something like that. And it was too much, man. I was getting not burned out on them, but I was getting where I just wasn't enjoying them as much because I just had so many different ones.
Yeah.
I still have a couple dozen squams, mostly adults and subadults. Hopefully I'll produce some babies this year. The reason I'm bringing up the vipers is not just because they were mentioned in the comments, but because it's going to tie into the feeding thing. Because you asked with the different species that I kept, and there's been even though I have a ton of venomous experience, it goes back to, I've been keeping venomous snakes almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And I got my first squam in 98. I traded a rock python for a squam in a like full bioactive enclosure before anybody used the word bioactive. I just thought it was awesome that all I had to do was change water and put a fuzzy in there every once in a while, and everything else just happened on its own. Thought it was badass. It's 20-gallon fish tank. You know, the learning curve recently has been with the vipers specifically. I've known what I can and can't get away with feeding pythons for a very long time. I've raised a lot of boas and pythons over the years, a lot of colubrids.
Yeah.
The viper metabolism can be very different, and it can be highly variable even within a genus. It's not just vipers. Look at Amazon tree boas versus emeralds or basins, right? You can feed the shit out of Amazon tree boas. It's almost impossible to get an Amazon fat before they're an adult, but you can have a baby emerald getting constipated and shitting their guts out in the cage real easily. Baby Amazons will eat as much as you feed them, and they'll shit in 3 days and be ready to rock and roll again. I've got baby Amazons in this rack right next to me and baby emeralds that I produced right behind me. And they're very, very, very different. So there's a huge amount of variability, not just among species, but just, I mean, even within one genus of what you can get away with. That being said, I agree completely that most of us used to overfeed our snakes. When I got really into like keeping reptiles large scale in the 90s, with the exception of huge pythons, everything ate weekly. We fed everything once a week. It didn't matter what the species was. We fed everything once a week. And there are some snakes that not only can you get away with it, but benefit from eating more than once a week as juveniles.
Yeah.
Bull snakes, for example, very high metabolic rate, and a species that literally is designed to eat multiple mammalian prey items at once. That's very literally what a bull snake is specifically designed to do. They're nest raiders and burrow raiders. Then you have animals that, like my Wagler's vipers, that are, I don't know if I can, there we go.
Hell yeah.
Baby Wagler's viper. You notice I keep almost everything the same way when they're juveniles. These baby wags, they were born to wild-caught females, and I feed the males a pinky once every 3 or 4 weeks, a small pinky. And these are young juveniles. They're just several months old. I feed the females a pinky, slightly bigger pinky, about every other week. Sometimes I'll go 3 weeks. Interesting thing about that, though, is that my buddy Rhett Stanberry, he's one of the only people that's ever just consistently produced Wagler's vipers in captivity in the United States.
Okay.
I'm feeding these males a pinky, these tiny little baby males that are barely big enough to eat. I won't even feed them a large pinky. They're that small.
Yeah.
Rhett's breeder male is 8 months old and eats 1 pinky a month and always has. Wow. He produces every year. He's 8 years old and he eats 1 pinky mouse a month. That's a full-grown male Wagler's viper. That being said, a full-grown male Wagler's viper is not but maybe twice the size of that little baby female that I just showed you.
Right.
Versus the adult females that are 24 to 40 inches long and super girthy. They look like the males look like they're a newborn baby by comparison.
Well, that's what happened early on with them, where some people even thought that they were a parthenogenic species because only females were coming in because they were collecting adults, when all along the males were they looked like juvenile females, even though they were males. They weren't collecting males.
Yep, and they either thought the collectors would think they were different snakes, and there's lots of solid green vipers that are just less desirable. But also, I kind of, this is just a theory of mine, but I think it's probably way fucking easier to find female Wagler's vipers in the wild than it is to find males. The females are black and yellow and massive, and the males are just a little green sliver, right?
Yeah,
so
that would make sense.
Anyways, and you're absolutely right. There was a shift towards feeding less that I think went way, way, way too far. And we see this problem in like everything. We see it in politics. We see it in the reptile community. People like to jump in extreme camps, and the people that live in extreme camps tend to be the most vocal, the most outspoken, especially on the internet. Most of these people won't say shit in person. They tend to be outspoken, especially on the internet. And the truth is that if you spend time on the internet, I'm not into politics, don't give a shit, but you can't avoid it. If you get on the internet, you got lots and lots of people being really, really loud about extreme left-wing and right-wing stuff. And to me, a lot of these people seem completely insane. And I'm like, man, how is it possible that there are this many human beings that actually feel this way? Because people all seem crazy to me. The truth is that most of us exist in the reasonable middle. We just aren't being loud about it on the internet because we're reasonable. And that's a problem with feeding snakes. There needs to be more people in the reasonable middle thinking about nuance and about context with feeding. And at the same time that there are people like fucking Jay Brewer feeding these retics insane amounts of food so he can get attention on the internet because of it, and so that they can lay 2 or 3 big giant clutches before they die from the related complications. And as a side note, if you raise python females more gradually and breed them every other year, you will net, eventually you'll have more eggs out of that female, because she will live longer and she'll produce a dozen clutches for you and live to be 30 instead of dying at age 10 after 2 clutches. Okay.
Right.
So, or age 5, or some of these guys are breeding their fucking ball pythons when they're 27 months old or whatever. Anyways. Having said that, I think people go way too far with the minimal feeding, because they do, and some really well-known people say some wild shit about how certain snakes should be fed. We had some discussion about green tree python feeding a short while ago on MJ's show, and there was some very extreme things being said about feeding chondros. And then that's been on the opposite side too. There's been especially in the past, a lot of just morbidly obese green tree pythons. And there are still to this day people who grossly overfeed their green tree pythons and have animals that are, 2-year-old males that are 750 grams or whatever. Is just gross to me. I have females that I raised that are 4.5 years old that are 750 grams, maybe. And to get to my philosophy on it, I fed the shit out of those snakes when they were young. I think that you don't have to do anything. My preference, because I'm raising snakes to breed, and I want my animals to be optimal size for producing bigger clutches and recovering from it well, right? And in certain circumstances, that doesn't just mean the females. There's some snakes where it's fine to keep the males tiny, chondros. I don't mind. I'll breed a male as I've gotten eggs from a female not entirely too long ago. The female is really old, and the male was probably 250, 275 grams when I threw him in there.
Wow.
And, so very small chondros, a lot of boas can be that way. There are examples like we just talked about with the boiga where it may be beneficial to have a bigger male than the female. And the females I haven't seen a huge discrepancy in clutch size that correlates with the size of the females with boiga. Reading that comment over here. Yeah, absolutely. And also, hi, Lisa. Lisa's awesome. I don't talk to her very often, but she's super cool and super knowledgeable and kind of low key. And she's produced some awesome stuff. And what I like about Lisa is she's a very critical thinker on these exact subjects. She always has great comments to throw in. And I love people that actually think about these things. And she's definitely one of them.
100%.
She's absolutely right. There's a huge difference between an obese animal and a large, well-muscled, lean animal. And there's massive amount of variability, even in siblings, not just across species or within species, even in siblings, clutch mates. There can be a huge amount of variability in their size and their growth rates. So I like to feed the shit out of everything for the first 1 to 3 years of its life, depending on the species. And I'm not on a schedule across the board. I am in my juvenile room feeding 1 to 4 times a week, but that doesn't mean any of my animals are eating 4 times a week. Right. I do, however, have some species that I will feed twice a week when they're young. So they're eating anywhere from every 3 to 8 days, but usually every 4 to 6 days. That's baby chondros. I try to feed my baby bull snakes twice a week. I will feed the baby mangrove snakes twice a week. The colubrids can handle it. So you have to find out for that species what they can handle as juveniles. And I push that and feed them as much as I think I can feed them that will not have them gaining excess fat. And there are people that will argue about that on the internet. I saw a girl in a bull snake group. People, especially younger, newer keepers, they like to get on and talk shit about all the old school ways as if everything old is outdated. It turns out that most things old are actually successful and consistent, and a few things we find better ways to do it. And so just ignoring everything any experienced keeper said because they're old school or whatever is fucking stupid. And only new, inexperienced people say shit like that. This girl was trying to argue that weekly was potentially too frequent for baby bull snakes. And I'm like, please get the fuck out of here with that nonsense.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you can damage, especially in a young animal, by restricting the feeding frequency. Like I have
100%
that were fed every 3rd week as babies. Not only are they smaller than animals that are 2 years younger that I produced, they grow at about a quarter of the speed now that they're on the same feeding schedule with the same size prey. I mean, to me, that's a stunted animal.
It's a stunted animal. And, I have one of those animals, and they were not fed large enough prey as juveniles, and they were not fed frequently enough. Her brother that I acquired as a baby, or as a, well-started baby he was very, very tiny when I got him. And I am not making any claim whatsoever that this is in any way related, but I lost that animal to fucking cancer at 3 years old.
I don't think it's related, but it's related to something.
I I can't see how that could be related to food, but I find it really strange that a U.S. captive bred and born animal um, died from cancer, got a massive tumor at 3 years old.
Yeah.
I have lost multiple animals to cancer over the years. All of them had one that was, I think the youngest animal I've lost to cancer was like 11 or 12. And I had a rattlesnake that was like 22 that died from cancer. I had a chondro that was like 16 that died from cancer. Not a 3-year-old captive bred animal. So anyways, but yes, that's, you can absolutely stunt their growth. And while I have seen exceptions, the general rule is that they will not grow at a proper rate when they're older if you underfeed them when they're younger. Looking at some of these comments over here. But yeah, and there's, again, there's a huge amount of variability species to species. And one of my strongest learning curves lately has been with the vipers. I found that we had this discussion the other day that I was overfeeding a lot of my vipers, juveniles and adults, not so much in frequency, but more in prey size. Vipers are not pythons. I have found that the fastest metabolic rates that I've seen in vipers have probably been with large rattlesnake species. Large rattlesnake species seem to be able to handle large
from low elevation.
Yeah, precisely. My Zabcan rattlesnakes are, in my opinion, underweight, and I feed them large rats every 3 or 4 weeks. I feed conversely, in the same stack of cages, I have a gaboon viper who is shorter than my male Zabcan's 5.5 feet long or something like that. My gaboon female, my biggest one, she's 5 feet long, which is a 5-foot gaboon is a fucking huge snake. She is a massive. Well, you've seen her before.
Than when I saw her.
Yeah, she's significantly larger. I feed her one jumbo rat 8 or 9 times a year.
Yeah.
She eats it in literal seconds. It doesn't leave any perceptible lump in her whatsoever.
Yeah.
She'll take half of it in her mouth in the initial strike, hold it for a second, and then chomp, and it's gone, and the tail's sliding down her throat, leaves no bump in her, and she still keeps growing.
Yep.
But that's because that's a snake that expends no calories. They're like 100% motionless, barely even breathing for very, very long periods of time.
Yep.
And that's what they do in the wild too. The Zabcans are more active, and the bigger rattlesnakes. I've seen plenty of obese, large rattlesnakes, but having kept multiples of them, I wondered, goddamn, how did you have to feed this snake to get it fat? Because I've never been able to get one fat.
I think a lot of those snakes are probably 15, 20 plus years old too.
Yeah, and old enough to have been fed weekly as young adults when they didn't need it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found that my squams, my eyelash vipers, these smaller species, you can only feed them real heavy for about a year. And it's still small prey items, but I'm starting to back them off away from weekly at about a year old. And my adult squams and eyelashes that are plenty big enough to eat small and medium mice, the adult females, and the males are big enough to eat large hoppers and small mice easily. I'm feeding the males fuzzies and the females hoppers, and they maintain really well like that. I started noticing that my eyelashes and some of my squams were getting fat, and it was harder for me to see in the squams because they hide a lot. And the crazy thing has been that I haven't been able. I made this shift along like a year ago, and I still haven't been able to get the weight off of them. And I'm barely feeding these snakes, dude. They take forever to lose the weight, man. and they're very low activity, and they don't move around much. Conversely, you can feed green tree pythons very heavily for the first 2 to 3 years of their life, and without them seeming to get fat. The thing that I go on is, are their defecations occurring normally?
Yeah.
And for the first time ever, of all the chondros I've raised, I recently noticed one of my young males. He's right about 2 years old. I noticed him starting to get a little chunky. He's the youngest chondro I've ever started to see get a little chunky. Okay. And so I've backed him off because he's now at 2 years old. I won't breed him until he's 3 or 4, but he's a sexually mature adult. So now I'm backing his feeding off. But yeah, man, I have green tree pythons that, it's crazy to me when I see how big some people's animals are, and the feeding regimens they claim to use. And I'm like, man, you're saying you feed your snakes the way that I know I feed mine, and yours are twice as big as mine. So something doesn't add up there, right? And I do have some massive green trees, but none that I raised. The biggest green trees that I have right now that I raised from neonates that I produced are 4.5 years old and 750 grams, females.
Yeah.
Right? And those are animals that I fed weekly until they were almost 3 years old. So, just like you said, I think we should feed them as much as we can do reasonably and safely when they're younger, to give them that head start to make them an optimal animal for reproduction, if your goal is to breed the snakes.
Yeah.
If it's not, it's fine. If you want to raise them more slowly, just don't go overboard with it. It's okay for baby snakes to be a little bit, thick, right? I like my males to be very lean, and with most species small. Seems like that can be problematic with scrubs. I know you mentioned saying that males can be intimidated by bigger females.
Yeah.
It can be problematic with the mangroves due to cannibalism. But with most species, most boas and pythons and vipers, these small, lean males, they're better breeders, and they're less intimidating to the female, and they can kind of sneak in there, get in there, So
I'd say the same thing exists for the montane rattlesnakes that I've seen so far. Smaller males will be intimidated by females as well.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of rattlesnake species, it seems like the males can outgrow the females with a lot of species.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with what was just said on there. You and I touched on that as well. We were talking about the quality of the rodent diet. I wish that I had the resources to produce my own rodents. I would only ever do that if I had a large enough operation to be able to pay somebody to do it for me, because I have zero interest in breeding my own rodents.
Yeah.
I have no interest in it whatsoever. The amount of time that would take out of my day is inconceivable. And the amount of money that I can make working on my snakes in a fraction of that amount of time pays for my feeders far and beyond. And I enjoy working my snakes. I don't enjoy I've done rodent breeding before. I do not enjoy it, but I wish I could have rodents sourced the way Kyle does, really awesome diets. I think it would make a huge difference in my snakes.
Yeah, and I do the same thing now here. I'm lucky enough where my girlfriend loves the rodents, so she does probably 80% of the work with the rodents, and I just get to reap the benefits. I think my take on it these days is that quality of the feeder is far more important than variety of diet. You could feed a very diet shit, and it's still a terrible diet. You could feed a diet of one thing that is high quality and be so much better than that shit varied diet. So people, I think the varied diet thing is a good selling point, and I think probably in general is a good thing to think about. But I think that in my opinion, quality of the food is far more important than variety. And and then like this comment, for people like us who know about health and fitness and research nutrition,
Yes.
the macronutrient content, and then you get down into micronutrients and vitamins and minerals. You can get down a whole rabbit hole, but just on a very basic level, the macros you're hitting, the calories, the energy balance is far more important than what that food item actually is.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's funny that you said that, because this is, you already know, that was literally the exact correlation that was happening in the parallel that was being drawn in my mind when we're talking about this stuff. It is far more important in human nutrition to eat whole foods and that are well sourced. But the even aside from sourcing and aside from micronutrients, those things they all these things have an impact, but they're very, very subtle. With human nutrition, if you get enough protein and don't eat too many calories, and your food is mostly whole food, with rare exceptions of people who have like strange genetic anomalies and shit, we'll take all that aside.
Yeah.
90+% of humans on Earth, if you eat enough protein, don't eat too many calories, and eat mostly whole foods, you will be healthy. Period. Like all the other shit is minutia that has a minimum impact, and I think it's the same thing with the animals. The thing with animals is that we're talking about 100% carnivorous animals when we're talking about snakes. So their macronutrient profile has the only carbohydrate they're getting is from gut content and potentially milk from pregnant females or whatever, right?
Yeah.
On that subject too, I think another parallel there, people talk about the fat content of rodents.
I was just going to pull this comment up for this exact conversation.
Yeah. So the thing is that I agree with what was just said, that maybe an older snake, I do prefer leaner rodents to be fed to my snakes, but I don't think it's necessarily because fat itself is bad. I don't think fat is bad for snakes or for people. I think we have the wrong look at that, because fat for humans has been demonized for so many years, which is
the
utter
sugar
nonsense.
Job on saturated fats for the sake of selling sugar products that has changed the way we look at animal and human nutrition for the decades following that. If it was so bad for you, we wouldn't be here right now, because that's what our ancestors survive on.
There is the strongest correlation of an issue with saturated fat is that is the LDL cholesterol factor, and I don't know how, if at all, this translates to snakes, but in humans, dietary cholesterol does not impact your blood cholesterol. You can eat all the cholesterol you want. Your body makes cholesterol. Your body strictly regulates cholesterol content. The cholesterol you eat doesn't make any difference in what your blood serum cholesterol is. Saturated fat, however, does increase LDL cholesterol, and LDL is pretty strongly, high LDL, especially correlated with low HDL and high triglycerides, is strongly correlated with heart disease. But humans are predators. We're supposed to eat meat and saturated fat. It's not arguable. The people that argue about it don't understand. But with snakes, also predators, but man, if you look at a deer versus a cow, the fat content is drastically different, and you get similar things in a wild rodent versus a captive rodent,
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons that I tend to switch any animal that's big enough to eat jumbo mice gets actually a weanling rat instead.
Right.
I raise everything on mice until they're big enough for a weanling rat because the equivalent size.
You avoid the milk in almost every capacity because once you get that weanling rat, you don't have that pup fat anymore. So conversely,
Yes.
you don't have that jumbo fat anymore.
Yes, and a jumbo mouse, well, you get a pack of jumbo mice. It's a pack full of balls of titties with legs sticking out of them, right?
Yeah.
They're these retired breeders.
And I think the jumbo mouse thing of people saying jumbo mice are bad, jumbo mice are bad. Well, what is your jumbo mouse? Is it a male that is 4 months old, or is it a retired breeder female? Because the nutritional the nutritional profile of those animals is night and day different. Because
Very different.
Fucking big. Some of the biggest males we have here are probably 55 to 60 grams. They're not fat.
Yep.
They're beefcakes.
Yeah.
But
yep.
They in the traditional breeding situations, most males, they don't make it to that size because they're euthanized
Yep.
as mediums or larges. Your jumbos
Yep.
are your retired breeders because if they're being fed a low quality diet, by the third litter, that 12 to 15 babies is now 8 to 10. The breeder doesn't like that. That female gets euthanized, replaced by a younger one. Now you have a fatty mom who may still be working out her milk too. So I love jumbo rats, but I love the right jumbo rat or mice. I love jumbo mice, but I love the right jumbo mice.
I agree 100% with that. And the other issue with what you receive when you order jumbo mice is just the sex ratio that's kept in those breeding colonies. When I get, when I get, and it's not even sometimes even just in the large because I don't order jumbo mice. Sometimes in my larges, I get these big breeder males that are obviously like past the size. It's obviously a retired breeder male. And dude, they're a totally different animal. And if all of my jumbos would be those big muscly males, I would order jumbos and I'd feed everything up until they were eating a rat bigger than that. But they're usually not. Packs of jumbo mice are old fat females, and I don't like it. I don't like feeding those to my snakes. But again, it's not just the fat content at that age, especially with a female. Their resources have been zapped by repeated litters. There's muscle degradation. There's bone density degradation. The things that you need decrease, and the things that you don't need increase. You don't need milk and fat for your snake, and and you do need bone density and young lean muscle. And so, anyways, I've kind of always been in that camp. That's why I like soft furs. I think African soft furs are like more like a natural prey item. I see. So what that comment about ASF being overrated? It's not about. I agree. Sometimes in some ways ASF are overrated, but it depends on what you're trying to feed. So for my green trees specifically, I think an ASF is the perfect prey item for a green tree because large and extra large ASF are the exact size of rodents that wild chondros eat. That's the rats that they eat in the wild. That's exactly how they're built. And that's why I love ASF. I do think that to say that they're just superior in every way is false. I think that they're overrated in that way.
Yeah, and I think that was a perpetuation mostly by the ball python industry. Of the same way other products that were related to ball pythons, like solid color tubs, were presented as the next big great thing that you guys all need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on now. And I think for that reason, to say an ASF is overhyped is I think it's a blanket statement. It doesn't kind of have
Yeah.
enough depth to it. I would say they were marketed in a certain way that, you know, it just isn't fair to what the animal is.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're the type of person who wants to feed a variety to your animals, ASF is it's perfect because it's a similar profile. It's, you know, it's obviously a different species. I mean, you know, we
Yeah.
have ASFs over here. I have some scrub pythons, some rattlesnakes, palm vipers that, you know, if they don't want mice, they may take a soffer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I think for
Same
what they
with same with ball pythons too, right? There's certain balls that won't take rats or whatever. They'll take
Yeah,
ASF.
I've had ball pythons get stuck on African soft furs, and that's very annoying when you want to sell that animal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, you're like, I can't in good faith because soft furs aren't readily available online.
Yeah.
I haven't had a snake that's not a soft fur or not a ball python get stuck on soft furs.
Yeah.
I've had some like starting on soft furs. Like I had one, my last barneck from last year that was a slow starter. A few, like probably about a month and a half ago, finally took a soffer after probably had to force feed it about 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
Didn't want the mouse, but the little fuzzy soffer was what it wanted.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and a big soffer male is about the size of a medium rat.
Yeah. Exactly.
So like for
Exactly.
me, you know, I don't have some sort of big place where I can breed a lot of rats. And
Mhm.
so I mostly breed rodents for smaller sizes. But with
Yeah.
the soft furs, some weeks when there's some bigger grow outs, I can use those instead of thawing medium rats. And I greatly prefer that
Mhm.
because, well, for a lot of different reasons, but just because the fact that I know what's in that animal food wise, how it was raised, I know how long that thing had been dead for because I just euthanized it. You know, there's so many risk factors that you can eliminate, and soft furs are
Yeah.
much easier to breed on a hobby scale, so to speak, than rats are.
They're also, from what I understand, lower smell and
Keep them clean. If they're
yeah.
dirty, if you keep your soft furs poorly and they get dirty, it actually smell like the shittiest like Mexican dirt weed that you've ever. Seriously, I mean it's shocking. You know.
High ammonia content in the substrate. Yeah, that's I want to breed some soft furs. I don't know if I have a spot that has the right temperature for it. I said I don't want to do any rodent breeding. I don't want to breed enough rodents to feed my collection. I would like to have a couple of small soft fur colonies just for chondros and to have like day old soft furs are too big for tiny baby chondros, but they're not too big for big baby chondros. And they have a little bit of fur, which I think can help and are more developed, which I think helps prevent prolapse. And they move differently. They move their movement. A live soft fur, their movement is more attractive because they're a little more capable at birth than a pinky mouse is. And so rather than like flailing around on their back and bouncing off of one corner like a pinky mouse does, a baby soft fur will move around the enclosure and attract the attention. And so if you got something that's wanting to eat live, they're a better candidate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is another interesting comment to add to this conversation. Lisa talking about how she doesn't like.
Yes.
I completely agree with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I do
Theoretically,
too.
a day-old chick is just a large feathery pinky, like you know, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I think if you have a species that is a bird specialist or like I have scrubs that won't eat rodents, they want birds. You know, if you can use like Coturnix quail instead that have been, you know, eating on their own, they weren't just farmed and killed right out of the egg like, you know, these day old chicks. What they do is they separate the males from the females. The females get raised, the males get pulled right away, and oftentimes it's get turned into
Yeah.
fertilizer.
Yeah.
So these things have not eaten any food. They are just these little yolk sacs. And I mean, tell me what your experience has been, but my experience is that when I feed chicks, the poops I get from the snakes are just, to me, they seem like unhealthy animal poop.
Dude, it's not just that. The smell, man. The fucking smell. When you feed, dude, anything. I used to, okay, because I buy chicks to feed, you know, for the, so I can have the down, because chick down is a major tool in my toolbox for establishing neonate chondros. I go straight to it. I don't even try it without it anymore. And so, you know, I have the chicks, and before they like get all freezer burned and shitty, I'm going to feed them to something.
Right.
Mostly they go to my Boiga and my Mangshan vipers. The Mangshans go fucking ape shit for birds, dude. I didn't even know that. I had a Mangshan male that was real finicky, and Ari was like, dude, if we feed ours quail. The quail, bro. Ari's like, ours go crazy for quail. I thought out a quail. And that thing had, this animal that had been so finicky, he had the craziest feeding response, man. Like grabbed it and like thrashed it around the cage and shit. So the Mangshans love them. The Mangroves love them. I won't. Oh, and I'll feed them to the beaded lizards as well.
Yeah.
But all of them, the Mangshans not so much. I don't really notice too much of a difference in the defecation from the Mangshan vipers, but I honestly suspect that Mangshans are largely bird eaters in the wild. Their luring, their caudal luring style suggests that to me.
Yeah.
And the way that they strike suggests that to me. They do that like upwards kind of flailing strike thing. And so I think that these animals, I think they're bird eaters. But with the mangrove snakes, their shit already smells absolutely horrifying. They're the worst. They no joke shit 2 to 3 times per meal, and it smells terrible. And when it's birds, it is somehow worse, as if like you wouldn't think that it could get worse. It's worse. It's worse with the beaded lizards. But dude, Amazons and scrubs, oh my God. It's like, it's terrible. And so I just stopped altogether, because my scrubs, my Amazons, my chondros, they will all eat chicks. I will not give them to them anymore. They can't.
I have two in particular, well, two to three, but two in particular that I have not yet gotten to take a rodent. They're wild caughts. And I'll be very happy when that day comes, because it's not fun in the meantime. And they don't grow, scrubs, they don't grow very well on that diet.
No, they don't get much out of birds or lizards. I actually think that I kind of theorize, and you know, it's me being into dinosaurs that kind of puts me on this, but I think that nutritionally a bird is closer to a reptile than it is to a mammal. 100%. And lizards and birds don't put weight on a snake like a rodent will. Yeah. And I also theorize that that's why chick down works as a scenting tool for green tree pythons, because I think a bird smells more like a lizard than it does a mammal. That's the only thing that makes sense to me for that, because baby green tree pythons, no neonate chondro ever ate a bird ever in its life. Like, what are they like rating hummingbird nests or something? Like they're just
very specified tiny bird.
Obviously green trees are opportunistic, but the vast majority of their diet, vast majority of all the stomach contents that were ever studied, the babies eat skinks, the adults eat rats, period. And you know, for whatever reason, chick down works really, really well. And when I can't get one to eat, I've never had a baby. I've only done this a handful of times, but I've never had a baby chondro turn down a gecko. They love lizards.
Makes
but
sense.
it doesn't put much weight on them. You got to get them over to rodents if you want them to grow, or you have to feed them lizards frequently.
Yes.
On that's something else we talked about in relation to prey size and growth rates and whatnot. Daniel Natusch did a study about the correlation between changes in head size and head structure, like head shape and size, correlated to prey change in green tree pythons. So essentially moving from eating lizards to eating rodents that were relatively larger. And that was the thing that kicked off the change in the head size and shape in wild green tree pythons. And we talked about head shape a little bit. I make all of my constrictors fight for their prey when I feed them. I shake the rodent when they grab it. Every once in a while, I'm breezing through and I'm kind of in a hurry and I don't do it too much. Yeah. But 9 out of 10 times when I'm feeding a constrictor of any size, unless they, the scrubs, my big Biot girls, sometimes they just snatch that motherfucker out of the tweezers and I don't have the opportunity. But if they do it, if they snatch it and they don't yank it back into the cage, or if I have time, I'll grab the tail of the rodent and shake the shit out of it. Yeah. And I've noticed that the snakes that I raise don't get that retarded captive snake face, bug eyes, short nose, all that bullshit.
Yeah, I agree. I've noticed the same thing with scrub pythons. I think one thing that I'm a firm believer in is that increases in prey size dictate growth spurts. You could be
absolutely.
You could be feeding calorically the same amount of multiple small items versus one large item, and the one large item is going to trigger more growth than the collective of the small items.
Yes.
For me, once a scrub python can eat a large rat, within a few months you'll see a very significant head structure change from juvenile head structure to to a more adult, thick, more vertically kind of oriented. Like that's they get robust.
Yeah.
You see the same with what you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. The only scrub that I have that has that weird captive head shape is the female F2 that was a runt and a problem feeder when she was younger.
Yeah.
And now that she's able to eat large rats, it seems to be starting to change. And so I'm hoping that she'll grow out of it. Lisa said that she shakes hers too. I wanted to ask Lisa. She mentioned something about a paper where like this. What did she say? The silver spoon theory about snake growth rate plasticity or something. I would like her to elaborate on that because I feel like it plays into what we're talking about.
Shout out to everybody who's been commenting this whole time. Honestly, it's been hard to keep track of it all, but this has been a really engaging conversation. I'm super grateful for everyone we're almost 3 hours deep, and there are more people listening now than there were an hour in. So I'm really happy. This is the kind of conversation that pushes forward husbandry. We're not coming at this from a critical standpoint of this group A, group B. We're just taking our anecdotal evidence, knowledge from outside sources and trying to put it together to do best by these animals. But I too am curious as to what that paper was kind of saying. If Lisa, if you're still here and want to give us a little summary, we will gladly discuss.
I'd also, even though I feel like we're bringing Lisa into the podcast tonight, but
send her the link.
I just want to say that I'm a fan because she says she has a hypo bull snake over there.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
I love my hypo bulls, man. They're just bull snakes. They're just, dude. For all the people listening, we do all this. I talk about chondros all the time. We're talking about vipers and boiga and all this fancy shit. Guys, go out and get a fucking bull snake. If you want a cool pet snake, go get a fucking bull snake. They are bulletproof. They're big and impressive and absolutely stunningly beautiful. They come in a million different colors. They're super easy to breed. go get a bull snake.
Yeah.
They're
They're
amazing.
General, you could make a very good argument that that's the most solid genus of captive snake. You can make a very strong for that.
Yes, they're so easy and just so beautiful and so much variation and just
complex. It's insane. It's truly you can never do them all. You could never.
No, and Steven sent me a Mexican pine recently, and she is stunningly beautiful. And he has a pair of Stillwater hypo bulls that I sent him, and they're just great animals. I've kept black pines and northern pines, and I was breeding Stillwater hypo bulls back to like 2009 or something like that, and they're just unbelievable animals, man. They do have cool behaviors. Here's a little trick too. Stephen, did I tell you about the litter box training with my bull snakes?
No.
Dude, check this out. Worst thing about keeping pits, they eat a lot, they shit a lot, right? That is, name one other drawback to keeping pits. Like the only even arguable one is that they're large and active, and they do just fine if you keep them in really deep tubs, like really like
probably keep them in a planted enclosure.
Oh yeah, they'll probably tear shit up. But if you make it a biotype and it's just dead grass and like a barbed wire fence and a piece of sheet metal. I said biotype. Biotope is what I meant to say. Bull snake biotope. I caught my first bulls in a field in Oklahoma underneath a piece of sheet metal, but that was still, it's kind of sad, but still to this day, the best flip of my life was when I was 12 and it was early spring, so it's still cold, so they really get under that sheet metal. And I flipped 2 6-foot bull snakes, 5-foot coach whip, and a 32-inch speckled king, all coiled up together, coiled literally together in a pile. King snakes that are snake eaters, coach whips that supposedly eat king snakes, and a pair of adult 6-foot bull snakes, all coiled up together. But
that's awesome.
Anyways, so Tony, shout out to Tony Jerome, Selective Scales. Tony's a python breeder. He has chondros and carpets and beautiful carpondros. Shout out to Gary Scabino. And Tony is, first of all, him and his wife Melissa, they're awesome fucking people. But so cool. They're just great people. But Tony has one bull snake, and it is the like plainest normal brown Texas bull snake ever. And he keeps it on paper. And at Bill Stiegel's house last year, I said, dude, I don't know how you get away with keeping that thing on paper. They're shit painters. You put them on paper, they literally paint shit all over the enclosure. I keep mine on Carefresh. It's expensive as shit. Even the off brands, it's expensive, but it's so absorbent. And I don't have a ton of bull snakes. I just have a trio of adults, and it's so absorbent. And I kind of have a hookup on it sometimes too. But Tony said, I put a hide box in there and the snake started using the hide box. And I was like, that's interesting. So literally next day that I was at work, I took these are 6-foot bull snakes. Yeah. I took the 6-quart shoe boxes that I used for their lay boxes a few months before that they barely fit into with a clutch of eggs. Just put Carefresh in the box. Same substrate that's outside of the box. Put Carefresh in the box. Put the box in the front of the tub next to their water bowl.
Okay.
Albeit this was just several weeks before they stopped eating. My bull snakes haven't eaten since the first week of November. They're just going to eat tomorrow for the first time since November. And I usually start feeding them a little earlier, like mid-February. I just been lazy and haven't pulled them out yet. Haven't fed any of the North American stuff that's up there in brumation. But anyways, at that point in time, I was feeding the girls once or even twice a week, trying to put that last little bit of weight on them before I stopped feeding them.
Mm.
And the bull snakes will shit at least once per meal, sometimes twice. And to date, my red female has not used the box once, and the older female 100% of the time.
Wow.
So I don't have to change substrate anymore for extended periods of time. I just have to reach in and pull out a 6-quart shoebox and dump it in the trash and wipe it out and stick it back in there and throw a fistful of substrate in there.
Huh. Wow, that's crazy. I mean, I've heard of and seen lizards do that, but definitely not snakes like that. So that's super interesting.
I'm just letting you guys know who are in the comments that my laptop is about to die. So I'm on my phone on here, but I'll no longer be able to. Oh, cool. Lisa said she sent us the PDF for that paper on Instagram. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And yes, they are like elapids. And interestingly, it's really funny that you say that, because I don't keep elapids. I don't like keeping them. They're high maintenance and they're very dangerous. And so the risk to reward ratio for me is like way skewed. So that's why I don't keep elapids. But I did have a big ass albino monocle cobra back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And she shit in her water bowl so much that I just gave her another water bowl, and I left the original one was just a tub. I just left it in there dry, and she would always shit in there. And so I just pull that tub out and wipe it, dump it out and wipe it out and stick it back in there.
The rest of these snakes should listen to us right now. Take notes from these elapids and Pituophis.
Yeah, litter box trained. My bull snakes are litter box trained. Thank you very much, Tony Jerome, for the magical secret. He literally took away the only thing that made my bull snakes any less enjoyable to keep. So now they are the perfect captive. And yeah,
well, I'll add needs a bull snake to the list of reasons why Pituophis are some of the best pet snakes. They're litter box trainable.
Fucking litter box trainable. So go out and get one. I'm going to go ahead and plug myself. I'll be pairing mine back up here in just a few weeks, and I'll have 2 big old clutches of I think my still waters are as nice as anybody else's out there. So
I would agree.
And yeah.
And I'll plug myself equally, as right over here off camera, I hear my Mexican pine snakes rustling around. So if you water bulls or Mexican pine snakes come later this year, you guys know where to go.
Yeah, we're plugging because we said earlier, I got one of your Mexican pines. Also, if anybody paying attention knows where I can get a really exceptional male Mexican pine. Otherwise, I'll just buy one from Steven later this year. Yeah, they're just incredible animals, man. Man, do we have anything else that we want to talk about?
We probably can, but we're pushing 3 hours, and you're so I bet you want to get to sleep here pretty soon.
Oh darn! I guess we'll have to do another episode.
So we figured out that Patrick can be on the same channel 2 weeks in a row for a cumulative time of over 5 hours, and there is still more to talk about.
Yeah. Yep. And no end to it. Most people, it's way harder to get me to stop talking about snakes.
It's been the easiest interview ever. You've talked for probably 2 hours and 40 minutes of the 2 hours and 54 minutes we've done so far. So it's been
and it's good timing. My laptop is dying. My headphones just told me low battery in a creepy female robot voice. And but yeah, here's another thing, this right here, the podcasting, this is the longest I ever sit down for, period. people ask me how I do the stuff that I do. First of all, I don't. People are like, how do you keep up with all that? I don't. I'm perpetually behind in my entire life on everything. I don't keep up with it. I have a full-time job, well over 300 snakes. I have, and not 300 ball pythons that don't require anything of me. I have all kinds of shit. I do way too much. Yeah, but one of the ways that I accomplish this is because I don't sit down. I relax at Amber's house. We watch a little bit of TV sometimes.
Yeah.
When I'm at home, if I'm not asleep, I'm on my feet. And the only time I sit down at my house, I don't even have a TV plugged in at my house. Never have. And I've lived here for 3.5 years. I've never, or a little over 3 years, never plugged a TV in over here. This is the longest I ever sit for, is to sit here and do this. Otherwise, I'm on my feet doing snake stuff or working out or cooking, or I'm asleep.
I mean, sounds like a pretty solid life right there. Hard to complain. I bet a little bit.
I'm not complaining at all.
I bet a little downtime sounds nice to you, but other than that, you got some incredible stuff going on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That.
Considering that we're 3 hours deep and there's probably 4 hours of topics we haven't spoken on, I think this may need to be somewhat of a regular occurrence over here on Kush's Corner.
I would agree, and hopefully I don't lose. I just lost one of my headphones, so hopefully the other one will stay long enough for us to log off here.
Well, we'll wrap it up then. So, where can everybody find you on social media? Reach out about animal availability. Plug everything you need to plug.
Gotcha. So I do have a Facebook page, but I stay pretty close to the max, and there's always about 1,000 people in my Facebook friends request purgatory. But don't hesitate. So you can still message me on Messenger. You don't have to be on my friends list, and don't hesitate to send me a friend request too. I occasionally go through and accept a bunch of them and delete a bunch of old bullshit. Yep. I have a snake page that I don't attend to enough. That is Arboreal Obsession on Facebook. And then on Instagram, I am gtpatrick.tx for my personal page, which is mostly snakes. And then I am Arboreal_obsession for my snake page, which is 100% snakes.
Hell yeah. Perfect. Well, dude, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for all the conversations and, looking at all the pictures of scrubs I send you and shit like that.
I love that shit. Please never stop spamming me with scrub python pictures.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, I'm gonna throw you backstage and close this out. But thank you again, man. This was an awesome time. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, man. And I'm sure I'll talk to you real soon.
Yes, sir. Hell yeah. All right. Have a good night, man.
Later on.
Well, that's it. Thank you guys for sticking around. This is by about 45 minutes, the longest episode. We've only done 3, but I think this is a good sign of things to come. I loved every bit of that conversation, and I hope everyone else did too. If you want to find me on social media, it's Scrub Shepherd on Instagram and just Stephen Kush on Facebook. For anyone who's interested in scrub pythons or anything else that I have going on, feel free to reach out. I try to respond to as many messages as I can. So if you send me a message, chances are I'll get back to you. But thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for everyone who was here live. Thank you to everybody who is listening afterwards, either on YouTube or on the streaming platforms. And we're going to be back here next week, same time, with another great episode. So I'm going to say good night, everybody. And we will catch you back here next week for another Kush's Corner.